Some women get stood up at restaurants. Ava Marlowe got recruited into a criminal empire instead. One freezing Chicago night, a dangerous man with tattooed hands sat down uninvited at her table and asked her to pretend to be his wife for exactly 1 hour, or armed men watching from across the room would turn the evening deadly. She said yes without understanding what that single choice would cost her. By the time Ava realized the temporary performance had become permanent, she was already standing inside a world where love meant survival and walking away meant dying. Want to see how far one dinner can destroy your entire life? Hit that like button, drop your city in the comments below, and follow this story to the end, because what happens next will leave you breathless. The text message arrived at 7:43 on a Thursday evening, while Ava Marlowe sat trapped in afternoon traffic staring at brake lights that stretched toward the Chicago skyline like a ribbon of defeated hope. This isn't working anymore. I'm sorry. Take care of yourself. 7 words. 3 years of carefully maintained relationship reduced to a text message Marcus probably composed while sitting at his desk pretending to review spreadsheets. Ava's hands tightened around the steering wheel until her knuckles went white against the leather. She didn't cry. Couldn't. The humiliation felt too large and too small simultaneously, a feeling that started in her chest and spread outward until her entire body felt numb and disconnected. Around her, the city moved forward. Horns blared. People crossed intersections bundled against the December cold. Life continued as if nothing catastrophic had just collapsed inside her chest. She should turn around. Cancel the reservation Marcus had made weeks ago at Miral, the rooftop restaurant they'd planned to celebrate his promotion. Go home. Change into sweatpants. Drink wine straight from the bottle like a reasonable person experiencing romantic devastation. Instead, Ava drove toward the restaurant. Pride made the decision before logic could interfere. Marcus wanted her humiliated and small? Fine. She'd show up looking flawless, eat an expensive dinner alone, and walk out with her dignity intact even if it killed her. By the time she handed her keys to the valet outside Miral's marble entrance, Ava had rebuilt her composure into something resembling armor. The burgundy dress she'd chosen that morning, soft, elegant, hopeful, now felt like a costume for a performance nobody asked to see. But she wore it anyway because the alternative was admitting Marcus had the power to completely destroy her evening. The elevator carried her toward the 30th floor in silence broken only by soft classical music and the faint hum of machinery. Ava stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls. 31 years old, corporate marketing manager, practical haircut, sensible shoes replaced tonight with heels that hurt. A woman who had spent 3 years waiting for a man to notice her the way he noticed his career. The doors opened onto understated luxury. Miral occupied the entire top floor, all floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering chaos of Chicago's downtown grid. Candlelight flickered across white tablecloths. Jazz drifted through the space like expensive perfume. Couples leaned toward each other across intimate tables, hands touching, wine glasses catching the light, everyone radiating the kind of effortless romance Ava had foolishly believed she'd be experiencing tonight. The hostess, a young woman with perfect posture and a smile that never quite reached her eyes, greeted her with professional warmth. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "Marlowe. Table for 2. Ava's voice came out steady. "Good. Of course. Right this way." The table sat beside the windows with a perfect view of the city sprawling beneath them like a galaxy made of glass and ambition. Ava slid into the chair facing outward so she could watch the skyline instead of the empty seat across from her. "Will anyone be joining you this evening?" The hostess adjusted the second place setting with practiced efficiency. "No." Ava forced brightness into her tone. "Change of plans." "I see. Well, your server will be right with you." "Alone." The word settled over the table like a physical presence. Ava ordered wine, something red and expensive that Marcus would have criticized for being too bold, and tried to look like a woman confident enough to dine alone at Chicago's most exclusive rooftop restaurant. Around her, conversations hummed softly. Laughter drifted from nearby tables. A man proposed 3 tables away and the woman cried happy tears while everyone applauded politely. Ava swallowed the bitterness rising in her throat and opened the menu without reading it. The wine arrived. She drank it faster than intended, ordered another glass. Then the atmosphere inside the restaurant changed. It happened subtly at first. A shift in energy so slight, Ava almost missed it. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they quieted, softened. Waiters straightened their posture. The hostess touched her hair nervously. Ava glanced toward the entrance. A man stepped out of a private elevator she hadn't noticed before. Tall, maybe 6'2". Dark hair swept back from a face constructed from sharp angles and controlled intensity. He wore black, expensive suit, black shirt beneath it, no tie, and moved through the restaurant with the kind of presence that didn't demand attention so much as command it through sheer gravitational force. But it was the tattoos that made Ava's breath catch. Intricate black designs crept up from beneath his collar, disappearing along his throat in patterns that looked deliberate and dangerous. More ink decorated his hands, symbols she didn't recognize wrapping around his knuckles and disappearing beneath his cuffs. He looked like violence dressed for dinner. Two men followed several steps behind him, not waiters. Security, Ava realized. They wore suits but moved differently, watchful, tense, hands loose at their sides in a way that suggested readiness rather than relaxation. The man in black scanned the restaurant with dark eyes that cataloged everything in seconds. His gaze passed over Ava without pausing, then continued toward a corner table partially hidden behind a decorative screen. Ava turned back toward the windows and tried to steady her heartbeat. She didn't know who he was, but she understood instinctively that he operated in a world completely separate from hers. A world where men wore violence like expensive cologne and power moved through rooms ahead of them like a warning. Her food arrived. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Then a shadow fell across her table. Ava looked up. The man in black stood beside her chair. Up close, he was even more unsettling, not because he looked threatening, but because he didn't. His face carried a strange calm, the kind of expression that came from complete control rather than effort. "I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner." His voice was low, accented slightly, Korean maybe, and impossibly steady. "But I need a favor." Ava's hand tightened around her wine glass. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "No confusion." He pulled out the empty chair across from her and sat down without asking permission. The movement was smooth, casual, as if sitting uninvited at a stranger's table was something he did regularly. "3 men near the entrance have been watching me since I arrived. They're waiting to see if I'm here alone." Ava's pulse kicked up. "I don't understand what that has to do with me. For the next hour, I need you to pretend to be my wife." The words landed between them like something physical. Ava stared at him. "You're joking." "I'm not." His eyes never left hers, dark, steady, completely serious. "Those men won't approach if they believe I'm here with someone. It changes the calculation, makes the risk too complicated." "Risk of what?" "Violence." He said it simply, without drama. "Probably not here. Too public. But they'll follow me when I leave. That becomes significantly more difficult if I appear to be with a companion." Ava's mind spun. This couldn't be real. Men didn't walk into upscale restaurants and recruit random women into elaborate performances involving criminal surveillance. That happened in movies, not in real life. Not to marketing managers eating dinner alone because their boyfriends dumped them via text message. "You're insane," she said finally. "Possibly." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "But you're also sitting here alone looking like someone recently had their evening ruined. We can help each other." "How does pretending to be your wife help me?" "Because for 1 hour, you won't be the woman eating dinner by herself. You'll be the woman having an interesting night." He leaned back slightly, relaxed but attentive. "And when this is over, I'll make sure you get home safely. No harm. No obligation afterward." Ava should have said no, should have called security, demanded he leave, made a scene loud enough that management would remove him immediately. Instead, she found herself asking, "What's your name?" "Jin Hei Jin." "I'm Ava." "I know." He gestured subtly toward her wine glass. "You ordered the Chateauneuf du Pape." "Good choice." "Most people here go for the Cabernet because it's safer." Despite everything, Ava almost smiled. "You've been watching me." "I've been watching everyone. Occupational habit." He flagged down a passing waiter without looking away from her. "Another bottle of the same wine for the table, please." The waiter nodded and disappeared. Ava pressed her palms flat against the tablecloth. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice came out steady when she spoke. If I do this, pretend to be your wife for an hour, what exactly does that involve? Conversation, dinner, act like we know each other well enough to be comfortable in silence. Jin's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a flash of something human beneath the controlled surface. The goal is mundane believability. We're not performing a dramatic love story. We're two people who've been married long enough that dinner together doesn't require constant entertainment. That's specific. I've had practice observing people. The wine arrived. Jin poured for both of them with the kind of precise efficiency that suggested he'd done everything in his life with similar attention to detail. He lifted his glass slightly. Not a toast, just acknowledgement. Ava lifted hers and drank. It was good wine. Better than good. The kind of bottle she'd never buy for herself because the price would make her feel guilty for weeks afterward. So, she said carefully, are you going to tell me what you do that results in armed men watching you in public restaurants? No? That's honest. You didn't ask me to lie. Fair point. Ava set down her glass. Outside the windows, Chicago glittered like broken glass scattered across black velvet. How do I know you're not the dangerous one? Maybe those men are cops. Maybe you're the person they're trying to arrest. If I were someone the police wanted badly enough to surveil during dinner, they wouldn't be sitting quietly at the bar. Jin's voice remained calm, factual. They'd have uniforms outside and probable cause to detain me before I finished my first course. So you're a criminal. I didn't say that. You didn't deny it either. True. He studied her for a moment with an intensity that felt like being examined under a microscope. Does that bother you? Ava considered the question. The smart answer was yes. The safe answer was yes. But sitting across from Jin Haejin in her burgundy dress meant for a man who couldn't even break up with her face to face, Ava discovered that safety wasn't particularly interesting anymore. Ask me again in an hour, she said. Jin's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but suggested he found her answer acceptable. They ordered food. Ava chose something she wouldn't normally pick. Duck breast with cherry reduction, wild mushrooms, microgreens she couldn't identify. If tonight was already surreal, she might as well commit fully to the absurdity. Jin ordered in Korean to the waiter who appeared beside their table without being summoned. The conversation was brief, efficient, and conducted in a tone that suggested authority rather than arrogance. When the waiter left, Ava raised an eyebrow. Do they always bring you a Korean-speaking server? I own part of this restaurant. Of course you do. The chef is an old friend. He specializes in fusion cuisine, traditional Korean techniques applied to French ingredients. Jin leaned back slightly, one hand resting on the table between them. Most people come here for the view and the social status. Very few come for the actual food. Which category do I fall into? Neither. You came here to prove something to yourself. The accuracy of that statement hit harder than Ava expected. She took another sip of wine to cover the sudden tightness in her chest. And what are you trying to prove? That I can sit through dinner without three men deciding to make it complicated. Is it working? Jin's eyes shifted subtly past her shoulder toward the bar area. His expression didn't change, but Ava felt the tension in him sharpen, like a blade being drawn. For now. The food arrived in courses. Each plate was a work of art, colors and textures arranged with surgical precision, flavors that unfolded in layers. Ava ate slowly, hyper-aware of every movement, every word, every shift in Jin's attention. They talked, not about his business or the men watching from across the restaurant. Instead, Jin asked questions that felt dangerously perceptive. What did she do for work? Marketing, corporate branding campaigns for tech companies. Boring but stable. Did she enjoy it? A pause. Then honesty. Not particularly. What would she rather be doing? Architecture. She'd started that degree before switching to something more practical. Why the switch? Money, family pressure, fear. Jin listened without interrupting, without offering empty encouragement or unsolicited advice. He simply absorbed the information as if her abandoned dreams mattered enough to pay attention. You're good at this, Ava said after a while. The conversation part, making this feel almost normal. People are patterns. Once you understand what they need, interaction becomes simpler. That sounds lonely. Something flickered across Jin's face, gone too quickly to identify, but present long enough to feel real. Loneliness is a choice. I made mine a long time ago. And you're satisfied with it? Satisfaction implies I expected something different. He refilled her wine glass without being asked. I operate in a world that doesn't allow room for regret. You adapt, or you disappear. That's bleak. It's honest. The hours stretched into 90 minutes, then 2 hours. Ava stopped tracking time and let herself sink into the strange intimacy of pretending to be married to a dangerous stranger who owned restaurants and spoke about violence the way other people discussed weather. Around them, the restaurant began to empty. Couples settled their checks. Waiters cleared tables. The jazz shifted from energetic to melancholy. Jin's attention never wavered from her completely, but Ava noticed the way his eyes tracked movement, the exit, the bar, the two security men who remained positioned near the entrance like statues carved from tension. "They're still here," she said quietly. "Yes." "What happens when we leave?" "I walk you to your car. My men follow at a distance. The three watching from the bar will decide whether escalating the situation is worth the risk." Jin's tone remained perfectly calm. "Most likely they'll choose not to. Witnesses make everything complicated." "Most likely?" "Nothing is guaranteed." Ava's pulse kicked up again. The wine and the surreal intimacy of the evening had almost made her forget that this wasn't actually a date. This was a performance designed to keep someone, probably both of them, safe from violence she couldn't see but could feel hovering around the edges of the night. Jin signaled for the check. It arrived instantly. He paid cash without looking at the total. "Ready?" he asked. "No, absolutely not." Ava was a marketing manager who spent her weekdays in conference rooms arguing about color palettes. She didn't walk out of restaurants with tattooed criminals while armed men watched from the shadows, but she stood anyway. Jin rose smoothly and moved to her side, one hand settling against the small of her back. The touch was light, professional, but it sent electricity racing up her spine. They walked toward the elevator together. The three men at the bar straightened. Ava felt their eyes tracking every step. Her breath came faster despite her attempts to stay calm. Jin's hand pressed slightly more firmly against her back. Not restraining, just steadying. "Keep walking. Don't look at them." The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. Jin pressed the button for the ground floor. As the doors slid shut, Ava caught a final glimpse of the three men. One of them pulled out a phone. The others stood slowly, adjusting jackets that probably concealed weapons. The elevator descended. Ava's heart hammered. "They're following us." "Yes." "You don't sound worried." "Worry doesn't change the situation." Jin's voice remained infuriatingly steady. "My men are already positioned outside. Yours is the white Honda in the third row, correct?" Ava stared at him. "How did you— I told you. I've been watching everyone." The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened onto the marble lobby. Jin's hand stayed against her back as they walked toward the entrance. Outside, the December night had turned brutal. Wind screaming between buildings, freezing rain turning the sidewalks slick and dangerous. Ava's breath fogged in the cold. The valet appeared immediately with her keys. Jin's two security men materialized from opposite directions, flanking them without a word. Behind them, the restaurant's entrance doors opened. The three men from the bar stepped out into the night. Everything slowed down. Jin's hand moved from Ava's back to her waist, pulling her closer. She smelled expensive cologne and something underneath it, gunpowder residue maybe, or just the sharp metallic scent of adrenaline. One of Jin's men stepped forward, positioning himself between them and the approaching threat. He said something in Korean, low, clipped, final. The three men stopped walking. For a long moment, nobody moved. Wind howled. Freezing rain drummed against the pavement. Chicago's downtown lights glittered through the weather like distant stars. Then one of the three men, the one in front, smiled slowly. He said something in Korean that Ava didn't understand but felt in her bones anyway. A threat. A promise. Jin replied in the same language. His tone stayed calm, but the words carried the weight of absolute certainty. The three men exchanged glances. Then slowly they turned and walked back toward the parking structure. Ava's legs felt weak. She gripped Jin's arm without meaning to. He looked down at her. You did well.
I didn't do anything. You didn't panic. That matters more than you think. He guided her toward her car, hand still steady against her waist. Drive straight home. Lock your doors. Don't stop anywhere tonight. What about you? I'll be fine. That's not reassuring.
It's the truth. Jin opened her car door. Ava slid behind the wheel, hands shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. He leaned down slightly, one hand on the door frame. Up close, his eyes looked tired beneath the controlled surface. Thank you for tonight. I'm sorry if it frightened you. I'm not sure frightened is the right word. What word would you use? Ava thought about it. The wine, the conversation, the strange intimacy of pretending to be someone's wife, the adrenaline still racing through her veins as dangerous men walked away into the Chicago night. Alive, she said finally. I felt alive. Something shifted in Jin's expression. Not surprise exactly. Maybe recognition. Drive safe, Ava Marlowe. He closed her door. Ava started the engine and pulled out into traffic. In her rearview mirror, she watched Jin standing beneath the restaurant's entrance lights, hands in his pockets, utterly still while his security men converged around him. The three men from the bar were nowhere visible, but she knew they were out there somewhere in the darkness. The performance was over. The normal world rushed back in. Streetlights, traffic signals, the ordinary chaos of a Thursday night in downtown Chicago. Ava drove home on autopilot, her mind spinning through everything that had just happened. She'd sat across from a criminal, drank his wine, pretended to be his wife, helped him avoid whatever violence had been hovering around the edges of their dinner. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that she hadn't felt this focused, this present, this genuinely interested in anything for months, maybe years. Marcus had ended their relationship with a text message that morning. By midnight, Ava barely remembered his name. She parked in her apartment building's underground garage and took the elevator to the 7th floor in silence. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirrored walls. Same burgundy dress, same practical haircut, but something in her eyes looked different, sharper, more awake. Her apartment felt too quiet after the intensity of the restaurant. Ava kicked off her heels, poured another glass of wine, and stood at the window overlooking the city. Chicago glittered beneath her like a circuit board. Somewhere out there, Jin Hae-jin was probably dealing with the aftermath of whatever situation she'd helped him avoid. Somewhere out there, 3 dangerous men were making plans. Somewhere out there, the criminal underworld she'd only glimpsed tonight continued operating in shadows most people never saw. And Ava had walked straight into the middle of it for no reason except pride in a stranger's request. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up expecting Marcus, an apology, an explanation, something pathetic and too late to matter. Instead, she found a text from an unknown number. Your wine is excellent. Sleep well. Jay. Ava stared at the message. Her hand started trembling again, but not from fear this time, from something else entirely. Something that felt dangerous and exhilarating in equal measure. She should delete it. Block the number. Pretend tonight had been nothing more than a surreal detour on the way home from humiliation. Instead, she saved the contact. And when she finally went to bed hours later, Ava dreamed of dark eyes and tattooed hands and the strange weight of pretending to be someone's wife, when the truth was she had no idea who she actually was anymore. 3 days later, a single white orchid appeared on her desk at work. No note, no explanation, just perfect white petals in a slim glass vase sitting beside her computer monitor when she arrived Monday morning. Ava's assistant noticed it immediately. Oh, that's gorgeous. Anniversary gift? Something like that, Ava heard herself say. The orchid stayed on her desk for a week. Then another appeared. Then another. Each one delivered mysteriously while she was away from her desk. During meetings, lunch breaks, coffee runs. Nobody saw who brought them. Security footage showed nothing useful. But Ava knew. 2 weeks after the dinner at Moral, her phone rang during a particularly boring budget meeting. Unknown number. She excused herself and stepped into the hallway. Hello? Ava Marlowe. Jin's voice came through the line, steady and calm, as if 2 weeks of silence between them was perfectly normal. I hope I'm not interrupting. I'm in a meeting. I'll be brief. Have dinner with me Friday night, 8 o'clock. I'll send a car. Ava's pulse kicked up. That sounds like an order, not an invitation.
It's a request, one you can refuse. A pause. But I'm hoping you won't.
She should refuse, should establish boundaries, protect herself. Remember that this man operated in a world that ended with violence and surveillance and men following him through parking structures. Where? She asked instead. Somewhere you've never been. Somewhere I think you'll appreciate. That's vague. Trust is built through uncertainty. That's a terrible philosophy. And yet you're still considering saying yes. She could hear the faint trace of amusement in his voice. 8 o'clock Friday. The car will arrive at your building. If you're not there, I'll understand. He ended the call before Ava could respond. She stood in the empty hallway staring at her phone. Around her, the office hummed with fluorescent normalcy. Copy machines, keyboards clicking, someone laughing in a distant cubicle. The ordinary world continuing as if nothing had shifted. But something had shifted. Ava felt it in her chest, in her hands, in the way her entire body hummed with anticipation instead of dread. Friday night arrived too slowly and too quickly simultaneously. Ava changed outfits 4 times before settling on a black dress that split the difference between elegant and understated. She told herself this was casual curiosity, professional networking with an interesting person, nothing more. At 7:58, her phone buzzed. The car is waiting outside. Ava grabbed her coat and went downstairs. A black sedan idled at the curb. The driver, one of Jin's security men from the restaurant, opened the rear door without speaking. Ava slid inside. They drove east through downtown Chicago, then turned onto streets Ava didn't recognize. Industrial areas, warehouses, graffitied walls and chain-link fences. Not dangerous exactly, but far from the polished neighborhoods she usually occupied. The car stopped in front of an unmarked metal door beside a loading dock. The driver opened her door. "Second floor, knock twice." Ava stepped out into the cold night air. The sedan pulled away immediately, leaving her alone in the empty street. She climbed the exterior stairs and knocked twice on a scarred metal door. It opened. Jin stood on the other side wearing dark jeans and a black sweater that made the tattoos on his hands stand out sharply. He looked more dangerous here than he had in the restaurant. No expensive suit to soften the edges, just raw presence and controlled intensity. "You came," he said. "You sent a car. You could have refused." "I could have." Ava stepped inside. The space beyond the door opened into a massive loft, exposed brick, industrial windows, warm lighting that spilled across polished concrete floors. A single table sat in the center surrounded by mismatched chairs. Food covered the surface in casual abundance. Korean dishes she didn't recognize, wine bottles already opened, candles flickering in mason jars. It looked nothing like Miral's polished luxury. It looked like someone's home. "Who else is coming?" Ava asked. "No one. Just us." "You cooked all this?" "The chef from Miral owed me a favor." Jin closed the door behind her. "And I wanted to talk somewhere private, somewhere nobody would be watching." "Should I be worried?" "You're always worried. That's why you're still standing near the exit." He moved toward the table without rushing. "Sit. Eat. Ask me questions you didn't feel comfortable asking in public." Ava followed slowly. Everything about this felt deliberate. The location, the privacy, the casual intimacy of a dinner table set for 2 in an industrial loft far from anyone who might interrupt. She sat across from him. Jin poured wine and began serving food onto her plate without asking what she wanted, somehow knowing exactly which dishes to combine. "How do you know what I like?" Ava asked. "I pay attention." "That's unsettling. Most true things are." He sat down across from her. "You're wondering why I invited you here. You're wondering what I want from you. You're wondering if tonight ends differently than it began. You really do notice everything. It's not observation, it's pattern recognition. People ask the same questions in different ways." Jin picked up his wine glass but didn't drink. "The answer is simple. I wanted to see you again, without the performance, without the pretense of protection or favors owed. Just dinner, conversation, possibility." "Possibility of what?" "That's what we're here to find out." They ate. The food was incredible. Complex flavors, perfect textures, each dish telling a story Ava didn't have the cultural context to fully understand, but appreciated anyway. And they talked. This time Jin answered her questions. Carefully, selectively, but honestly. He'd grown up in Seoul. Came to Chicago 15 years ago. Built something from nothing through connection, strategy, and willingness to operate in spaces most people avoided. He didn't specify what that meant, but Ava filled in the implications easily enough. "You're asking me to tell you I'm a criminal," Jin said at one point. "The answer is yes and no. I operate businesses that are legal. I work with people who aren't. I've done things I can't undo and wouldn't apologize for even if I could." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because if you're going to keep seeing me, you deserve to understand what that means." "And what does it mean?" Jin set down his fork. His eyes met hers directly. "It means sometimes men watch from across restaurants. It means my phone rings at 3 in the morning and I have to leave without explanation. It means there are parts of my life I can never share completely. It means dating me, if that's what this becomes, will always carry an element of danger you didn't choose." That's quite a sales pitch. "I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm trying to be honest." He leaned back slightly. "You're not someone who fits into my world easily, Ava. You're normal, stable. You probably haven't broken a significant law in your entire life. Getting involved with me changes that." "Then why invite me here?" "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since you sat across from me at Miral and pretended to be my wife, like it was the most natural thing in the world." His voice stayed calm, but something underneath it felt raw. "Because when you said you felt alive that night, I recognized something in you I haven't seen in anyone else. Because for the first time in a very long time, I wanted something I can't control or calculate or predict." The confession settled between them like something fragile. Ava's hands tightened around her wine glass. Every rational part of her brain screamed warnings. This was dangerous, reckless, the kind of decision that couldn't be undone once she made it. But sitting across from Jin in the candlelight, watching him strip away the controlled exterior to show her something real, Ava realized she'd already made the decision weeks ago when she'd saved his number instead of deleting it. "I want to see you again," she said quietly. Jin's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Relief, maybe, or recognition. "Then we'll figure it out," he said. "Together." The night stretched on. They talked until the candles burned low and the wine bottles emptied. Jin told her about the restaurant business, about the careful balance between legitimate ventures and the underground economy that funded them. Ava told him about her abandoned architecture degree, about the frustration of spending years in corporate marketing when she'd once wanted to design buildings. Around 2 in the morning, Jin walked her back downstairs. The same sedan waited at the curb. "This isn't goodbye," he said. "No?" "No, this is the beginning of something neither of us fully understands yet." He opened the car door for her. "Sleep well, Ava Marlowe." She slid into the back seat. As the car pulled away, Ava looked back through the rear window. Jin stood beneath the streetlight, hands in his pockets, watching her leave. And for the first time since Marcus had destroyed her carefully constructed life with 7 words, Ava felt like maybe the destruction had been necessary. Maybe some things needed to fall apart before they could become something better. The car drove through empty Chicago streets while Ava stared out at the city and wondered exactly how much danger she'd just invited into her carefully ordered existence. She was about to find out. The weeks that followed felt like living inside someone else's life. Ava went to work, attended meetings, responded to emails, smiled at colleagues who asked about her weekend. But underneath the corporate routine, everything had shifted into a strange double exposure. The ordinary world layered over something darker, more dangerous, infinitely more compelling. Jin called at unpredictable hours, sometimes late at night when she was already in bed, his voice low and tired. Sometimes during her lunch break with an invitation she couldn't refuse. The pattern felt deliberate, calculated to keep her slightly off balance, constantly aware of him even when he wasn't physically present. They had dinner 3 more times over 2 weeks, never at the same place twice. Once at a private dining room hidden behind a noodle shop in Chinatown, where armed men stood outside the door and Jin conducted business in 3 languages while she ate soup that tasted like someone's grandmother had been cooking it for 50 years. Once at his loft again, where he cooked this time, simple food, rice, and grilled fish and vegetables cut with surgical precision, while telling her about growing up poor in soul and learning early that survival meant adapting faster than everyone around you. Once at an upscale wine bar where they sat in a corner booth, and he taught her how to identify people carrying concealed weapons by the way they moved through crowded spaces. By the end of the night, Ava had correctly spotted 4 of them.
You're a quick study, Jin said, refilling her glass. Or you're turning me paranoid. Paranoia is just pattern recognition applied to danger. He watched her over the rim of his wine glass. Most people go through life completely unaware of the violence happening around them constantly. You're starting to see it. That's not paranoia. That's clarity. I'm not sure I wanted clarity. Too late now.
He was right. Ava had crossed some invisible threshold and couldn't find her way back to comfortable ignorance anymore. She noticed things now. The way certain restaurants had back exits that stayed unlocked, the way Jin's security men positioned themselves with clear sightlines to entrances, the way conversations stopped when he walked into rooms. But she also noticed other things. The way Jin listened when she talked, fully present, asking follow-up questions that proved he'd actually absorbed what she'd said. The way he remembered her coffee order after hearing it once. The way he touched her, careful, deliberate, as if she were something valuable that required protection. Marcus had spent 3 years barely noticing her. Jin noticed everything. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like finally being seen. The orchids kept appearing. Every Monday morning, a fresh one on her desk. Ava's assistant eventually stopped asking about them. The flowers became part of the landscape. Beautiful, mysterious, impossible to explain. Then one afternoon during a marketing presentation, Ava's phone buzzed. She glanced down expecting a text from Jin. Instead, she found a message from an unknown number. "We know about you. Stay away from him or consequences will follow." Ava's blood went cold. She excused herself from the conference room and stepped into the hallway, hands shaking as she read the message again. No signature, no additional context, just a threat delivered casually between bullet points about brand positioning. She called Jin immediately. He answered on the first ring. "What's wrong?" "How did you, you never call during work hours. Something happened. Tell me." Ava read him the message. Silence stretched on the other end of the line. Not empty silence, but the kind that felt heavy with suppressed violence. "Where are you right now?" Jin's voice had shifted into something flat and dangerous. "At my office, 5th floor, marketing department." "Go to your desk. Act normal. Don't leave the building until I call you back." "Jin, do exactly what I just said, Ava. I'll handle this." The line went dead. Ava stood frozen in the hallway. Around her, the office hummed with ordinary corporate chaos. Someone arguing about a deadline, a printer jamming, laughter from the break room. Normal life continuing while everything inside her chest twisted into panic. She returned to the conference room, sat through the rest of the presentation without hearing a single word. Her mind kept replaying the message. Stay away from him or consequences will follow. Who sent it? How did they get her number? What consequences? 2 hours later, Jin called back. "I'm downstairs," he said. "Come down now. Bring your things." "I can't just leave." "Yes, you can. Tell them it's a family emergency." Ava grabbed her coat and bag, invented a lie about her mother having a fall, and took the elevator down to the lobby. Through the glass entrance doors, she saw the black sedan idling at the curb. Jin stood beside it wearing dark jeans and a leather jacket, looking completely out of place against the sterile corporate architecture. She pushed through the doors. Cold February air hit her face. Jin opened the car door. "Get in." "Where are we going?" "Somewhere we can talk without anyone listening." His expression was unreadable, but his jaw was tight. "Please, Ava, just get in the car." She got in. They drove in silence through downtown traffic. Ava watched buildings slide past the window while her pulse hammered in her throat. Jin sat beside her, one hand resting on his thigh, the other holding his phone. He typed something rapidly in Korean, sent it, then set the phone down and finally looked at her. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For not anticipating this. For underestimating how quickly people would notice you. For putting you in danger." He rubbed his face, the first crack in his composure Ava had ever witnessed. "I should have been more careful." "Who sent that message?" "I don't know yet, but I will." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "There are people who watch me constantly. Rivals, competitors, men looking for leverage or weakness. Normally they focus on business assets, money, territory, connections. But you're different. Because I'm not part of your world. Because you matter to me in ways business assets don't." Jin turned toward her fully. "That makes you vulnerable. And in my world, vulnerability is the most dangerous thing you can be." Ava's hands were still shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs. What happens now? Now we make sure you're protected. Security outside your apartment building. Escorts to and from work. Someone watching you at all times until I identify who sent that message and eliminate the threat. Eliminate. Handle. Remove. Make very clear that touching you results in consequences they won't survive. His voice stayed calm, but underneath it, Ava heard something cold and lethal. I won't let anyone hurt you because of me. Maybe I should just stop seeing you. The words came out before Ava could stop them. Logical, practical. The smart solution to a dangerous problem. Jin looked at her for a long moment. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want. Her voice cracked. A month ago, I was a normal person with a boring job and a mediocre boyfriend. Now I'm getting anonymous death threats and sitting in a car with armed security driving me to some undisclosed location. This isn't my life, Jin. This is your life, and I don't know if I can... She stopped. Couldn't finish the sentence because finishing it meant admitting she was terrified. I understand, Jin said quietly. If you want to walk away, I won't stop you. I'll make sure you're protected regardless. The threat will be handled. Your life will return to normal. We'll pretend the last month never happened. That's not possible. No, but we can try. He reached over and took her hand, the first time he'd touched her with something like hesitation. Or you can stay. Let me protect you properly. Stop pretending this is temporary and admit we're already past the point where walking away is simple. Ava stared down at their joined hands. His knuckles were tattooed with symbols she still didn't understand. His palm was rough with old scars. Everything about him spoke of violence and control and a world she'd spent 31 years successfully avoiding. But his hand was also warm, steady, anchoring her when everything else felt like it was spinning apart. I need time to think, she whispered. Take all the time you need. But you're staying somewhere safe tonight while I handle this situation. The car pulled into an underground parking structure. Ava didn't recognize the building. They took an elevator to the 15th floor in silence. Jin led her down a hallway to an unmarked door, pressed his thumb against a biometric lock, and ushered her inside. The apartment was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River, minimalist furniture in blacks and grays, art on the walls that looked expensive and deliberately chosen. Everything immaculate, everything controlled. This is yours? Ava asked. One of several properties I maintain. Jin set her bag down near the entrance. No one knows about this location except my immediate security team. You'll be safe here. How long? 48 hours, maybe less. He moved toward the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, checked its contents with the efficiency of someone conducting an inventory. There's food, wine. The entertainment system is voice-activated. Don't open the door for anyone except me or the man who drove us here. His name is Min Jun. If someone else knocks, use the panic button beside the bed. Armed response arrives in under 2 minutes. You've done this before. Protected people? Yes. How many of them survived? Jin turned to face her. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely tired, not physically exhausted, but emotionally stripped down to something raw. All of them survived the external threats. Not all of them survived being close to me long term. What does that mean? It means proximity to me comes with a cost. Some people pay it willingly. Some people realize too late that the price was higher than they understood. He crossed back toward her, stopping just outside comfortable touching distance. I'm giving you an honest chance to calculate that cost before you're in too deep to leave cleanly. Maybe I'm already in too deep. Maybe, but you deserve the choice anyway. He left before Ava could respond. The door closed with a soft click. The biometric lock engaged with a mechanical hum. She was alone in a stranger's apartment 15 floors above Chicago, while armed men dealt with threats she couldn't see. Ava walked to the windows. The city spread out beneath her, gray river, skeletal bridges, buildings climbing toward a clouded sky. Somewhere out there, Jin was hunting whoever had sent that message. Somewhere out there, dangerous men were making calculations about her value as leverage. Her phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. Hiding won't help. We know where you are. We know everything. Ava's stomach dropped. She stared at the screen, pulse racing. How did they know? She'd been in this apartment less than 10 minutes. Nobody had followed them. Jin had been careful. Unless they were lying. Unless this was psychological warfare designed to make her panic. She called Jin immediately. "What's wrong?" He answered before the first ring finished. "They sent another message. They said they know where I am." Silence. Then, "Read it to me exactly." Ava repeated the message word for word. "They're guessing," Jin said, "trying to make you feel exposed. If they actually knew your location, they would have included specific details to prove it. Stay calm, stay inside. I'm 20 minutes away." "From where?" "From making sure this stops." The line went dead again. Ava paced the apartment. 20 minutes felt like hours. She checked the locks twice, tested the panic button without pressing it, a small red button mounted beside the bedroom door, innocent and terrifying simultaneously. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo. Her office building, taken from across the street. Recent. The timestamp showed this afternoon, less than an hour before she'd left work. The message below it read, "Run to him all you want. We'll still find you." Ava's hands went numb. She dropped the phone. It hit the hardwood floor with a crack that sounded too loud in the silent apartment. Someone was watching her, following her, documenting her movements. The threat wasn't abstract anymore. It was real, immediate, personal. She pressed the panic button. Within 90 seconds, Min-jun burst through the door with his weapon drawn, followed by two other men Ava didn't recognize. They swept the apartment with military efficiency, checking rooms, testing windows, speaking rapidly in Korean through earpieces. "You're safe," Min-jun said in accented English. "Stay away from windows." Ava backed into the corner of the living room, heart hammering so hard her ribs hurt. The security team positioned themselves strategically, one by the door, one near the windows, Min-jun standing between her and any potential threat. 10 minutes later, Jin arrived. He moved through the door fast, eyes scanning the room until they landed on Ava. Something in his expression cracked when he saw her pressed into the corner, pale and shaking. He crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her against his chest. "You're okay. You're safe. I'm here." Ava's hands fisted in his jacket. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe properly. Everything felt like it was collapsing inward. Jin said something sharp in Korean to his men. They filed out immediately, closing the door behind them. Then he guided Ava to the couch and sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders, solid and anchoring. "Show me the messages," he said quietly. Ava retrieved her cracked phone from the floor and handed it over. Jin scrolled through the messages, his jaw tightening with each one. When he reached the photo, he stared at it for a long moment before setting the phone down carefully on the coffee table. "This is my fault," he said. "It's not." "It is." His voice stayed low but carried an edge Ava had never heard before. "I let myself get distracted. I wanted something normal for once in my life, and I stopped being as careful as I should have been, and now you're paying for my mistake." "Who's doing this?" "I don't know yet, but I have theories." Jin ran his hand through his hair, the first genuinely uncontrolled gesture she'd seen from him. "There are 3 organizations in Chicago that would benefit from destabilizing my operations. 2 of them I have arrangements with. The third has been testing boundaries for months. This feels like their methodology." "What are you going to do?" "End it." The certainty in his voice was absolute, permanently. "What does that mean?" Jin looked at her directly. "It means I'm going to find whoever is threatening you and make very clear that continuing poses more danger to them than it could possibly be worth. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to eliminate the problem completely." "You mean kill them?" "If necessary." The casual way he said it should have terrified her. Instead, Ava felt something else, a dark, primal satisfaction that someone was finally willing to meet violence with violence on her behalf. Marcus had never even raised his voice to defend her. Jin was prepared to kill for her. "I don't want you to do something you can't take back," she said carefully. "I've done plenty of things I can't take back. This won't be the first." He turned toward her fully. "But I need to know if you can live with what that means. Not in theory, in practice. Because once I handle this the way I know how, there's no pretending I'm anything other than what I am." "And what are you?" "A man who survives by being more dangerous than the people trying to hurt him." No apology in his voice, no shame, just brutal honesty. "I'm not redeemable, Ava. I'm not secretly noble underneath the violence. This is who I am. The only question is whether you can accept that." Ava thought about the last month, the dinners, the conversations. The way Jin had slowly opened parts of himself she suspected nobody else ever saw. The gentleness beneath the control, the exhaustion beneath the power. She thought about Marcus texting her a breakup from his desk. She thought about 3 years of being invisible to someone who claimed to love her. She thought about feeling alive for the first time in years because a dangerous man sat down across from her and asked for help. "I can accept it," she whispered. Something shifted in Jin's eyes. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm staying anyway." He kissed her then, fast, desperate, like a man who'd been holding back for weeks and finally lost the ability to maintain control. Ava kissed him back just as hard, her hands in his hair, his arms around her waist, both of them breathing too fast and holding on too tight. When they finally broke apart, Jin pressed his forehead against hers. "I won't let anyone hurt you." "I know. And when this is over, we're going to have a long conversation about what happens next. About whether you actually want this life or if you're just running from your old one. Maybe I'm doing both. That's what I'm afraid of." He pulled back slightly, thumb brushing along her jaw. "But right now, I need to go handle this situation. Stay here. Don't leave. Don't open the door for anyone except Minjun." "How long will you be gone?" "However long it takes." He stood, already shifting back into the controlled, dangerous version of himself. "Try to sleep. I'll call you when it's done." He left without looking back. Ava sat alone in the silent apartment while night fell over Chicago. Hours passed. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, just paced between the windows and the couch while her mind spun through every possible outcome. At 2 a.m, her phone rang, Jin's name on the screen. She answered immediately. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. It's handled." His voice sounded tired. "You won't receive any more messages. The people responsible have been educated about the consequences of threatening you." "What does educated mean?" "You don't want details." "Yes, I do." A long pause. Then, "I found the man who sent the messages. He was hired by a rival organization to gather intelligence and apply pressure. I explained that you were off limits. He disagreed. We reached an understanding through less diplomatic means. His employers have been notified that any further action toward you will result in a war they won't survive." The message was received. "Is he alive?" "Does it matter?" "Yes." "Then yes, he's alive. Damaged, but breathing." Another pause. "Are you disappointed or relieved?" Ava pressed her free hand against her stomach. "I don't know." "That's honest." She heard the faint sound of traffic in the background. "I'm heading back now. We'll talk more when I get there." "Jin?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for protecting me." "You don't need to thank me for that. It's not optional." His voice softened slightly. "Get some rest, Ava. The worst part is over." But he was wrong. The worst part was just beginning. Because 3 days later, on a gray Saturday afternoon, while Ava was finally starting to believe life might return to normal, everything changed. She was at a farmer's market near her apartment. Something ordinary, something safe, surrounded by crowds and families and vendors selling organic produce. Just trying to feel normal again after days of looking over her shoulder constantly. Then a man approached her between the vegetable stalls. Mid-40s, unremarkable face, wearing a jacket too heavy for the weather. He smiled pleasantly. "Ava Marlowe?" Her blood turned to ice. "I don't know you." "No, but I know you, and I know Jin. Hey, Jin." He stepped closer. Not threatening, just present. He thinks he handled the situation. He thinks his warning was sufficient, but he underestimated how valuable you've become. "Stay away from me." Ava backed up. People moved around them, completely unaware anything was wrong. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to deliver a message." The man reached into his jacket. Ava's heart stopped. She turned to run. "Relax." He pulled out a phone, showed her the screen. "Just look." The photo showed Jin standing outside an industrial building Ava didn't recognize. The angle suggested surveillance from a distance. Professional. Recent. "We've been watching him for months," the man said conversationally, "long before you entered the picture. But you've made things interesting, given us leverage we didn't have before." "What do you want?" "For you to understand that Jin Heijin is not invincible, and neither are you." He pocketed the phone. "What happens next depends entirely on his choices. Tell him Viktor Kozlov is finished waiting. Tell him the debt will be paid one way or another." I don't understand. You don't need to, just deliver the message. The man smiled again, empty, professional. Enjoy your Saturday, Ms. Marlowe. He walked away into the crowd. Ava stood frozen between vegetable stalls while her entire world tilted sideways. Viktor Kozlov. A name she didn't know attached to a debt she didn't understand connected to a danger she couldn't see. She called Jin immediately. I'm at the farmer's market on Ashland, she said before he could speak. Someone just approached me. Said his name was Viktor Kozlov. Said you owe a debt. The silence on the other end stretched so long Ava thought the call had dropped. Then Jin said very quietly, Get out of there. Now. Minjun is 2 blocks away. He'll meet you at the northwest corner. Do not go home. Do not go anywhere familiar. Just get to Minjun and let him bring you to me. Jin, what's happening? Something I thought I'd buried years ago. His voice sounded hollow. I'm sorry, Ava. I'm so fucking sorry. Just get to Minjun. I'll explain everything when you're safe. The call ended. Ava ran. She pushed through the weekend crowd, heart hammering, not looking back, just moving toward the corner Jin specified. Minjun was already there, standing beside the black sedan with the engine running. He opened the door. She dove inside. They drove fast through Chicago streets while Ava tried to catch her breath. What's happening? Who is Viktor Kozlov? Someone very dangerous, Minjun said. His English was clipped, tense. Someone Jin hoped would never find him. Why? Because 5 years ago, Jin killed his brother. The words hit like a physical blow. Ava stared at Minjun's reflection in the rearview mirror. What? It was justified. Self-defense. But Viktor Kozlov doesn't care about justification. He cares about revenge. And now he knows the best way to hurt Jin. Through me. Yes. The car pulled into an underground parking structure Ava recognized, the building where Jin's loft was located. They took the elevator up. Minjun stayed 2 steps ahead, one hand hovering near his concealed weapon. The loft door was already open. Inside, Jin paced like a caged animal. When Ava entered, he crossed to her immediately and pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. I'm okay, she managed. He didn't hurt me. He just talked. That was a warning. Jin's voice was rough. Next time won't be. Tell me what's happening. Who is Viktor Kozlov? Why does he think you owe him? Jin released her and stepped back. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely afraid. Not of physical danger, but of losing something he couldn't replace. 5 years ago, I was involved in a territorial dispute, he said. Viktor's brother, Alexei, tried to expand his operations into areas I controlled. We negotiated. Failed. Things escalated. Alexei came after me directly. Ambush, assassination attempt, the works. I survived. He didn't. You killed him. Yes. No apology, just fact. It was him or me. I chose me. Viktor has spent the last 5 years trying to find a way to make me pay for that choice. He's tested me, pushed boundaries, waited for an opening, and now he's found one. Me. You. Jin's jaw tightened. Viktor operates differently than most people in this world. He doesn't just want me dead, he wants me destroyed. Emotionally, psychologically. He wants to take everything I care about and burn it in front of me before he finally kills me. So what do we do? I end this, permanently. No more warnings, no more negotiations. Viktor Kozlov dies, or I do. He said it with absolute finality. But that means war. Open, brutal, destructive war that will consume everything around it. And I can't ask you to stay for that. Ava's throat tightened. You're telling me to leave. I'm telling you that staying means watching me become someone even darker than I already am. It means living under guard constantly. It means accepting that every morning you wake up, there's a chance I won't come home that night. Jin moved to the window, staring out at the city. You deserve better than that. You deserve normal, safe. A life that doesn't involve checking over your shoulder constantly or wondering if the man you're sleeping with will survive the week. And what if I don't want normal? Then you're insane. He turned back toward her. But I already knew that. Anyone sane would have run the night I sat down at your table. Ava crossed to him slowly. Everything in her logical brain screamed to listen to him, to walk away while she still could, to protect herself from the catastrophe she could see approaching. But when she reached Jin, she took his face between her hands and forced him to look at her directly. "I'm staying," she said.
Ava, I'm staying. Firmer this time. I don't care about normal. I don't care about safe. I care about you. And if you're going to fight Viktor Kozlov, then I'm going to be here when you come home. Not because I'm insane, because I choose this. I choose you, whatever that costs. Something broke in Jin's expression. Relief and fear. And something raw that looked like hope he was afraid to believe in. He kissed her hard, hands tangled in her hair, both of them holding on like the world was ending. Maybe it was. But for the first time since a stranger had sat down at her table and asked her to pretend to be his wife, Ava understood something fundamental. She wasn't pretending anymore. This was real. The danger was real. The love growing between them was real. And there was no walking away from real once you'd finally found it, even if it killed you. The war started 48 hours later. Not with gunfire or dramatic confrontations, but with silence. The kind of silence that settled over Jin's organization like fog, heavy, suffocating, impossible to see through. Phone calls went unanswered. Contacts disappeared. Business partners suddenly had scheduling conflicts that lasted indefinitely. Viktor Kozlov was squeezing. Ava watched it happen from inside the loft, while armed men moved through the space in rotating shifts, their presence a constant reminder that normal life had evaporated completely. She couldn't go to work, couldn't go home, couldn't step outside without 3 bodyguards and a surveillance team clearing the route ahead. Jin was gone most of the time, 18, 20-hour stretches where he'd leave before dawn and return after midnight smelling like cigarette smoke and tension. When he was present, he moved differently, sharper, colder. The careful control that usually defined him had been stripped away, replaced by something more primal. "You need to sleep," Ava said one night when he returned at 3 in the morning. She was curled on the couch, pretending to watch television she couldn't focus on. "I'll sleep when this is over." Jin poured himself whiskey without turning on the lights. The city glow through the windows provided the only illumination, cold, blue, making everything look like a crime scene. "How long until it's over?" "I don't know." That's not reassuring.
"I'm not trying to be reassuring. I'm trying to be honest." He drank the whiskey in one swallow and poured another. "Victor is better positioned than I anticipated. He's got infrastructure I didn't know about. Alliances I underestimated. Every move I make, he's already 3 steps ahead." Ava stood and crossed to him. "You're not alone in this." "Yes, I am. That's the problem." He finally looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was devastating. "Everyone I trust is vulnerable. Everyone I care about can be leveraged. Victor knows that. He's not attacking my business. He's attacking everything around my business until I'm isolated enough to be destroyed cleanly. So what do we do?"
"You don't do anything. You stay here.
"You stay safe. And I figure out how to kill Viktor Kozlov before he kills everyone I've ever given a damn about." The brutality of the statement should have shocked her. Instead, Ava just felt tired. This was the reality now, not dinners and wine and careful conversations, just survival measured in days, hours, breaths. She took the whiskey glass from Jin's hand and set it down. Then she pulled him toward the bedroom without speaking. He followed, moving like someone whose body was on autopilot while his mind worked through scenarios that all ended badly. They lay in bed together fully clothed, Ava's head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. Both of them staring at the ceiling while Chicago hummed outside the windows. "I used to think I understood danger," Ava said quietly. "I thought it was something you could see coming and avoid if you were smart enough." "It's not. No, it's everywhere, constant. You just learn to live with it pressing against you constantly until you forget what it felt like to breathe without weight on your chest." Jin's hand moved through her hair, slow, rhythmic, the only gentle thing about him anymore. "You can still leave. I meant what I said. Walk away. I'll make sure you're protected, even after this is over." "I don't want to leave." "You should." "Probably." She turned her head to look at him. "But I'm staying anyway." He kissed her forehead, didn't argue. Maybe he was too tired. Maybe he needed her there more than he'd admit. They fell asleep like that. 2 people holding on while the world burned down around them. Ava woke alone. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The apartment was silent except for the muffled sounds of Min Jun and another guard talking in Korean near the entrance. She checked her phone. 10 in the morning. A text from Jin sent 3 hours earlier. Had to handle something. Stay inside. I'll call later. Standard message, standard warning. But something felt wrong. Ava couldn't identify what exactly. Just a feeling that crawled up her spine and settled at the base of her skull like an alarm she couldn't silence. She got dressed and made coffee. Tried to distract herself with television, with her laptop, with anything that wasn't obsessively checking her phone for updates. At noon, Minjun's phone rang. He answered in Korean, listened for 30 seconds, then his entire body went rigid. He said something sharp, urgent, then ended the call and immediately made another one. Ava stood up. What's wrong? Minjun held up one hand. Wait. His second conversation was fast, tense, his voice rising with each exchange. When he finally hung up, his face was pale. We need to leave, he said. Now. Why? What happened? Jin's been taken. The words didn't make sense at first. Ava's brain couldn't process them. Taken. Like he was an object. Like someone had just reached out and grabbed him. What do you mean taken? Ambush. 20 minutes ago. He was meeting with a contact in Pilsen. Victor's men were waiting. Minjun was already moving, grabbing weapons from a hidden safe, checking ammunition with mechanical efficiency. They killed 3 of our people. Took Jin alive. Ava's legs went weak. She sat down hard on the couch. Where is he? We don't know yet. Victor will make contact. He'll want something in exchange. Minjun crossed to her, his expression grim. But right now we need to move you to a secondary location. If they took Jin, they'll come for you next. I'm not leaving until I know he's alive. He won't be alive much longer if you're captured too. Victor will use you to break him. Then he'll kill both of you. Minjun's voice was harsh but not unkind. Jin would want you protected. That's my job now. Let me do it. Ava's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered before Minjun could stop her. Ava Marlowe? The voice was accented, Russian maybe, and sounded almost friendly. My name is Victor Kozlov. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance. Her blood turned to ice. Where is he? Jin, he's with me. Alive. For now. A pause. Would you like to hear his voice? Proof of life, as they say in the movies? Yes. Rustling. Movement. Then Jin's voice came through the line, rough, strained, but unmistakably his. Ava, don't do anything he asks. Don't negotiate. Just disappear. Let Minjun... The sound of impact. A grunt of pain. Then Victor's voice returned, still pleasant. As you can hear, he's breathing. How much longer he continues breathing depends entirely on you. What do you want? Something very simple. You, in exchange for him. A trade. You come to a location I specify, alone, and I release Jin unharmed. Everyone walks away. No more violence, no more war. Just a clean exchange, and we all move forward with our lives. You're lying. Perhaps. But what choice do you have? If you refuse, I kill him slowly while you listen. If you agree, there's at least a chance I'm telling the truth. Victor sounded genuinely curious, as if this were an interesting philosophical problem instead of someone's life. You love him, yes? That's what my intelligence suggests. So the question becomes, how much? Ava's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. Minjun was making frantic gestures. No, don't listen, hang up. But she ignored him. Where? She asked. I'll send coordinates. Come alone. No weapons. No security. If I see anyone following you or detect any surveillance, Jin dies immediately. You have 2 hours. The line went dead. 30 seconds later, a text arrived with a location. An abandoned industrial complex in South Chicago, far from anything, isolated, perfect for an ambush. Minjun grabbed her arm. You can't actually be considering this. He'll kill Jin if I don't. He'll kill both of you if you do. This is a trap, Ava. Victor doesn't make deals. He eliminates threats. You walking into that building means 2 bodies instead of 1. So what's the alternative? I hide here while they torture him to death? The alternative is we mount a rescue operation. We have resources, contacts, ways of finding people who don't want to be found. Minjun's grip tightened. But that takes time. Time we won't have if you get yourself captured trying to be heroic. Ava pulled her arm free. I'm not trying to be heroic. I'm trying to keep him alive. By sacrificing yourself? If necessary. That's not what he would want.
I don't care what he wants. I care that he's breathing at the end of this. She grabbed her coat. You can either help me or stay out of my way, but I'm going. Minjun stared at her for a long moment. Then he swore viciously in Korean and pulled out his phone. I'm calling for backup, long-range surveillance. They won't be close enough for Victor to detect, but they'll have eyes on the location. Fine. And you're wearing a tracker, non-negotiable. Fine. He disappeared into another room and returned with a small device, barely larger than a button. He pressed it against her skin just below her collarbone. It adhered instantly, invisible under her shirt. If something goes wrong, we'll know where you are. His expression was grim. Though by the time we reach you, it might already be too late. I'll take that risk. The drive to South Chicago took 40 minutes through afternoon traffic that felt deliberately designed to torture her. Every red light, every slow-moving truck, every second stretched into an eternity while Ava's mind spun through worst-case scenarios. Victor would kill her immediately. Victor would use her to torture Jin before killing them both. Victor would keep them alive for days, extracting maximum suffering before finally ending it. None of the scenarios ended well, but there was no other choice. Not really. Ava had already made her decision weeks ago when she'd chosen to stay. When she'd chosen Jin over safety, over normal, over the ordinary life she'd been living before he sat down at her table and changed everything. The industrial complex appeared ahead, massive, decaying, surrounded by chain-link fencing and warning signs about structural instability. Ava parked where the text message instructed and got out. The silence was absolute. No traffic sounds, no voices, just wind moving through broken windows and rust-stained metal. She walked toward the main building. The door hung open, darkness beyond it. Ava stepped inside. Her eyes adjusted slowly. The space was enormous. A former factory floor, equipment long since stripped out, leaving only concrete columns and scattered debris. Light filtered through holes in the ceiling, creating irregular patterns across the ground. Very brave of you to come alone, Victor's voice echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. Or very stupid. I haven't decided which yet. Where's Jin? Nearby, watching. I wanted him to see this part. Footsteps approached from behind a concrete column. Victor Kozlov emerged into the light, tall, gray-haired, wearing an expensive suit that looked absurd in the industrial decay. He smiled. You're prettier than the photograph suggested. I'm not here for compliments. You said you'd trade, me for him. Let's do it. So direct. Americans always want to rush through the important moments. Victor circled her slowly, hands clasped behind his back. Tell me something. Do you understand who Jin Hae-jin really is? Not the romantic version, not the dangerous man with hidden depths, the actual person beneath the performance. I know who he is. Do you? Did he tell you about Seoul? About the things he did before he came to Chicago? About the bodies he left behind when he decided to start fresh? Victor's voice stayed conversational, almost friendly. Jin is very good at making people believe he's something more than a killer, but that's all he is. That's all he's ever been. And you've fallen in love with a lie. You don't know anything about us. I know everything about you, Ava Marlowe. 31 years old, corporate marketing manager. Boring life interrupted by a chance encounter that felt like fate. He stopped circling, standing directly in front of her. I know you're here because you think love conquers all, that your sacrifice will mean something, that somehow this ends with both of you walking away. I'm here because you said you'd let him go, and you believed me. Victor laughed. A cold, sharp sound that echoed through the empty space. That's the beautiful thing about love. It makes intelligent people do catastrophically stupid things. Movement behind Victor. Ava's breath caught. Two men emerged, dragging Jin between them. His face was bruised, blood crusted under his nose and at the corner of his mouth. His hands were zip-tied behind his back, but his eyes were clear, focused, and absolutely furious. Ava, he said, why the fuck did you come here? Because he was going to kill you. He's going to kill both of us now. You just made it easier. Victor smiled wider. See?
He understands perfectly. This isn't a trade, Miss Marlowe. This is a demonstration. I want Jin to watch you die knowing it's his fault. That his weakness for you created the opening that destroyed you both. And then, when you're gone and he's broken completely, I'll kill him too. The men holding Jin forced him to his knees. One of them pulled out a gun and pressed it against the back of his head. Victor drew his own weapon and aimed it at Ava's chest. "Any last words?" he asked pleasantly. Ava's mind went blank. No clever escape plan materialized. No rescue team burst through the doors. Just her and Jin and the man who'd been hunting them both, seconds away from ending everything. Then Jin spoke. "Victor, wait."
Why? So you can beg? I've been waiting 5 years to hear you beg. Not begging, offering. Jin's voice was steady despite the gun against his skull. Let her go. Kill me. Take everything I've built. Dismantle my entire organization. Burn it all down. Just let her walk out of here alive. Why would I do that?
Because she's innocent. She has nothing to do with what happened between us. She doesn't deserve to die for my mistakes. Something cracked in Jin's voice. "Please, I'm asking you, let her go." Victor considered this for a long moment. Then he lowered his weapon slightly. "You really do love her. How unexpected. I thought you'd burned out that part of yourself years ago. Apparently not."
Fascinating. Victor looked at Ava. What about you? Do you love him enough to walk away and let him die alone? Ava's throat was so tight she could barely speak. No. Ava, Jin started. No. Louder now. I'm not leaving without you. If we die together. Victor laughed again. This is even better than I imagined. True love in all its suicidal glory. How poetic. He raised his weapon again. Fine. Together it is. Close your eyes if it helps. The gunshot was deafening.
But Ava didn't feel anything. She opened her eyes. Victor staggered backward, blood spreading across his chest. His weapon clattered to the concrete. He looked down at the wound with an expression of genuine surprise, then collapsed. Behind him, one of the men holding Jin stood with a smoking gun. Not one of Victor's men, one of Jin's. The second man released Jin immediately and pulled a knife, cutting through the zip ties. Jin surged to his feet, grabbed Victor's fallen weapon, and moved toward Ava in 3 long strides. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. What just happened?" "Extraction. We've had someone inside Victor's organization for 8 months, waiting for an opportunity exactly like this." Jin pulled her against his chest, one hand on the back of her head. "I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. This was the only way to get close enough to end it." Ava's brain couldn't process the information. "You knew I was coming? Minjun called me the second you left. We've been tracking you since you got in the car." He pulled back to look at her face. "I never would have let Victor actually hurt you, but I needed him to believe he'd won, needed him distracted enough that he wouldn't see the betrayal coming. You used me as bait." "Yes." The admission hung between them, honest, brutal, unforgivable. Ava shoved him away. "You used me as bait without telling me. You let me think I was walking into a trap. You let me believe we were both going to die. If you'd known the plan, Victor would have seen it in your reactions. It had to be real." Jin reached for her again, but she backed away. "Ava, don't touch me. Please let me explain." "Explain what? That you're exactly what Victor said? A killer who manipulates people? That everything between us has been performance?" Her voice cracked. "I came here to save you. I was ready to die for you. And it was just another operation. Just another calculated move in your endless game. That's not fair." "Fair?" Ava laughed. Sharp, bitter. "Nothing about this is fair. I gave up everything for you. My job, my safety, my entire life. And you've been treating me like a strategic asset instead of a person. That's not true." "Then what am I, Jin? What am I to you, really? Because right now I have no fucking idea." Behind them, Viktor Kozlov died. The man who'd shot him was already on the phone coordinating cleanup. The second operative stood guard near the entrance, everything moving with practiced efficiency because this was just business to them. Just another problem solved through violence and deception. Jin's face was pale beneath the bruises. "You're everything. That's the problem. You matter so much that I'll do anything to keep you safe. even if it means you hate me afterward. Well, congratulations, mission accomplished. Ava's hands were shaking, her entire body was shaking. The adrenaline crash hit her all at once, and suddenly she couldn't stand anymore. Jin caught her before she fell. She tried to pull away but didn't have the strength, so she just stood there in his arms, hating him and needing him and not knowing how to reconcile those two truths. I want to leave, she whispered. Take me back to the loft, and then leave me alone. Ava, please. The drive back happened in silence. Jin sat beside her in the back of the sedan, close enough to touch but maintaining careful distance. Every time Ava looked at him, she saw the bruises Victor's men had given him, saw the exhaustion, saw the man who'd been willing to offer his own life for hers. But she also saw the man who'd used her as bait without telling her, the man who'd let her walk into terror thinking she was going to die, the man who treated love like a chess game where every piece was expendable if it achieved the right outcome. Back at the loft, Jin followed her inside. The security team stayed outside. It was just the two of them and the wreckage of whatever trust they'd built over the past 2 months. Ava poured wine with shaking hands, drank half the glass before speaking. I need you to leave for a while. I need space to think. I understand, but first I need you to understand something. Jin moved closer, not touching, but present. Everything I've done has been to protect you. Every manipulation, every calculated move. I'm not apologizing for keeping you alive. Even if it means destroying us in the process. There is no us if you are dead. His voice was hard, final. You can hate me, you can leave, you can spend the rest of your life thinking I'm a monster, but you'll be alive to do all of that, and that matters more to me than whether you forgive me. That's not how relationships work. I've never had a real relationship before you. I don't know how they work. I only know how survival works. Jin's hands clenched into fists at his sides. If you want someone who'll always tell you the truth, who'll never make decisions without consulting you first, who operates like a normal person in a normal relationship, I can't be that. I'm too damaged, too controlled by instinct, too willing to sacrifice anything except your life. Then what are you offering me? Someone who will burn the world down before letting anyone hurt you. Someone who will lie and manipulate and use every tool at his disposal to keep you breathing. Someone who loves you enough to let you hate him if that's what survival requires. He finally reached out, fingertips brushing her jaw. It's not enough. I know it's not enough, but it's all I have. Ava closed her eyes, tears leaked down her cheeks without permission. I don't know if I can live like this. Never knowing what's real. Never knowing if you're telling me the truth or feeding me another performance designed to achieve some outcome I can't see. I'm telling you the truth right now. I love you. I've loved you since you sat across from me at Miral and decided to trust a dangerous stranger. Everything since then has been me trying not to destroy the best thing that's ever happened to me. His thumb wiped away her tears. But I'm not wired for normal love. I'm wired for survival. And sometimes those two things look identical, and sometimes they're completely opposed. I don't know how to fix that. I don't know if it can be fixed. So where does that leave us? I don't know. The honesty of it was devastating. No false promises, no easy reassurances, just brutal truth from a man who'd spent his entire life learning how to survive instead of how to love. Ava opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked. Past the tattoos and the bruises and the controlled exterior, saw the exhaustion, the fear, the desperate hope that maybe somehow she wouldn't walk away despite having every reason to do exactly that. She should leave. Should pack her things, call a cab, return to her ordinary life and pretend the last 2 months had been a nightmare she'd finally woken up from. But her ordinary life didn't exist anymore. Marcus was gone. Her job was gone. Her apartment probably wasn't safe. Everything she'd been before Jin had already been dismantled piece by piece. And standing in front of her was the man who'd done the dismantling. Not through malice, but through sheer gravitational force. The man who'd shown her what it felt like to be completely seen. The man who'd used her as bait, but who'd also been ready to die so she could live. I need time, she said finally. I need to process this. Figure out if I can accept who you are and how you operate. But I need you to give me space to do that without disappearing or trying to fix it with grand gestures or manipulating me into forgiveness. How long? I don't know, days, maybe longer. Jin nodded slowly. I'll stay somewhere else. Minjun will remain with you. If you need anything, I'll call.
He moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, using you as bait was the hardest thing I've ever done. Watching you walk into that building knowing you thought you were going to die. His voice broke. I'll carry that for the rest of my life, whether you forgive me or not. Then he left. Ava stood alone in the loft, surrounded by the evidence of the life they'd been building. Her clothes in his closet, her books on his shelves, her presence woven through the space like she'd always belonged there. But belonging required trust, and trust required honesty. And Ava didn't know if she could trust a man whose first instinct was always strategy instead of truth. She finished her wine and poured another glass. Outside the windows, Chicago glittered like a promise or a threat. Ava couldn't tell which anymore. Maybe they were the same thing. 5 days passed in suffocating silence. Ava stayed in the loft. Jin stayed away. Min-jun maintained his post outside the door like a statue carved from obligation, speaking only when necessary, his presence a constant reminder that safety came at the cost of freedom. Ava tried to rebuild something resembling normalcy. She contacted her office with a resignation email that felt too simple for what she was actually giving up. She avoided the news, avoided social media, avoided anything that might show her the world Jin operated in, now that Viktor Kozlov's death had created a power vacuum people were fighting to fill. But avoidance didn't work, because on the 6th morning, someone knocked on the loft door with the kind of urgency that made Min-jun immediately draw his weapon. Ava heard muffled Korean through the door, sharp exchanges. Then Min-jun opened it partway, and a woman pushed past him into the apartment. Mid-30s, black suit, expensive but understated. She moved with the controlled efficiency of someone accustomed to navigating dangerous spaces. When she saw Ava, she stopped. Ava Marlowe? Who are you? My name is Sarah Chen. I'm an FBI agent. She pulled out credentials, badge, identification, everything official and terrifying. I need to talk to you about Jin Ha-jin. Ava's stomach dropped. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You've been living with him for weeks. You were present at the industrial complex in South Chicago when Viktor Kozlov was killed. You're connected to an ongoing federal investigation into organized crime activity. Sarah's voice stayed calm, professional. And right now, you have a choice to make. Min-jun moved between them. She doesn't have to talk to you without a lawyer. That's true. But lawyers slow things down, and Ava doesn't have time for slow. Sarah looked past Min-jun directly at Ava. Can we talk? Alone? 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Don't, Min-jun said quietly. Jin would want you to stay silent until... Jin isn't here. Ava stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to stay steady. 5 minutes. Min-jun looked like he wanted to argue, but ultimately stepped aside. Sarah moved to the center of the room and waited until Min-jun retreated outside, leaving them alone. Thank you, Sarah said. Tell me what you want. We've been investigating Jin Ha-jin's organization for 18 months. Money laundering, racketeering, interstate trafficking, connections to at least 7 murders. Sarah pulled out a folder from her bag and set it on the coffee table. We have enough evidence to indict him, but indictments aren't convictions. We need testimony. Someone on the inside willing to provide detailed information about his operations. You want me to betray him? I want you to tell the truth about a criminal enterprise that's been operating in Chicago for over a decade. Sarah's expression didn't change. I know you care about him. I understand that this is complicated, but Jin Ha-jin is not who you think he is. The man you fell in love with? That's a performance. The real version has blood on his hands that won't ever wash clean. And if I refuse to cooperate, then you'll be charged as an accomplice. Conspiracy. Obstruction. You'll spend the next 10 to 15 years in federal prison while Jin walks free because we can't build a strong enough case without insider testimony. Sarah leaned forward slightly. Or you cooperate. Provide detailed information about his business operations. Testify when the case goes to trial. And in exchange, you get full immunity, witness protection, a new life somewhere far away from all of this. Ava's hands were shaking again. She pressed them flat against her thighs. You're asking me to destroy him. I'm asking you to save yourself. Sarah's voice softened slightly. You didn't choose this life, Ava. You stumbled into it because a dangerous man decided you were worth pursuing. But you can still get out.
You can still have a future that doesn't involve looking over your shoulder constantly or wondering when the next threat will arrive. All you have to do is tell the truth. The truth about what? Everything: his business partners, his financial operations, the properties he owns, the people he's killed or ordered killed, everything you've seen or heard during your time with him. Sarah pushed the folder closer. Look at the evidence we've already gathered. Then decide if protecting him is worth sacrificing your entire future. Ava stared at the folder. Didn't touch it. How long do I have to decide? 48 hours. After that, we move forward with or without you. And if we move forward without you, that means charges, arrest, everything that comes with refusing to cooperate with a federal investigation. Sarah stood. I know this is impossible. I know you love him, but love doesn't change what he is. And what he is will destroy you eventually if you let it. She left her card on the coffee table beside the folder and walked out. Ava sat frozen. Minjun returned immediately, his expression grim. How much did you hear? Ava asked. Enough. He moved to the window, looking out at the city. You need to call Jin, now. Why? Because if the FBI is approaching you directly, that means they're preparing to move against him. And if they're giving you 48 hours, that means they're planning raids, arrests, everything designed to dismantle his organization completely. Minjun turned back toward her. He needs to know. Ava pulled out her phone, stared at Jin's contact information. They hadn't spoken since he'd walked out 6 days ago, hadn't exchanged messages, hadn't acknowledged each other's existence. Now she was supposed to call him and tell him the federal government wanted her to betray him. She pressed dial. He answered immediately. Ava? Just her name, but it carried the weight of 6 days of silence. 6 days of not knowing if she'd forgiven him or decided to walk away permanently. We have a problem, she said. The FBI was just here. Silence. Then, I'm coming to you. Don't talk to anyone. Don't touch anything they left. Just wait for me. Jin, 20 minutes. Stay inside. The line went dead. Ava set down her phone and looked at the folder Sarah Chen had left behind. The evidence of Jin's life. The proof of everything he'd done. Everything he'd built through violence and strategy and ruthless efficiency. She should open it. Should look at the evidence. Should see exactly who she'd fallen in love with beyond the careful performance he'd been maintaining. Instead, she left it closed. Because whatever was inside that folder wouldn't change the fundamental problem. Ava knew what Jin was. Had known from the beginning. The question wasn't whether he was a criminal. The question was whether she could live with loving one. 17 minutes later, Jin burst through the door. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him, exhausted, unshaven, wearing the same clothes he'd left in days ago. But his eyes were sharp, focused, immediately cataloging everything in the room. Where's the agent? He demanded. Gone. She left 20 minutes ago. What did she say? Ava repeated the conversation. Jin listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening with each detail. When she finished, he picked up the folder and threw it across the room without opening it. Fuck. He pressed his palms against his eyes. This is worse than I thought. How bad? Federal investigation means they've been building a case for months, maybe longer. If they're approaching you for testimony, that means they don't have enough evidence to convict me without insider cooperation. He lowered his hands. Which means you're the key to everything. You testify, I go to prison for the rest of my life. You refuse, they charge you as an accomplice, and we both end up in cages. There has to be another option. There isn't. Not one that doesn't involve running or dying or spending decades in federal custody. Jin moved to the window, staring out at Chicago. I knew this was coming eventually. I just didn't think it would be this soon, or that they'd use you as the pressure point. What do we do? We? He turned back toward her. Ava, there is no we in this scenario. You cooperate with the FBI. You tell them everything. You take immunity and disappear into witness protection where I can never find you and neither can anyone else in this world. That's not what I'm asking. It's the only answer that keeps you alive and free. I don't care about free if it means betraying you. Then you're an idiot. His voice went hard. Listen to me very carefully. I've done everything Sarah Chen accused me of and worse. I've killed people. I've laundered money. I've built an organization through violence and intimidation and strategic brutality.
Every word in that federal file is true. And if you protect me, you're choosing to go down with someone who absolutely deserves everything the government wants to do to him. So I should just let them destroy you? Yes, that's exactly what you should do. Jin crossed back to her, taking her face between his hands. I love you. That's real. That's the only real thing in my entire life. But loving you means protecting you even from the consequences of loving me. So you're going to cooperate. You're going to testify. And you're going to forget I ever existed. I can't do that. You have to. No. Ava pulled away from him. You don't get to make this decision for me. You don't get to decide what I sacrifice or don't sacrifice. This is my choice. It's the wrong choice. Maybe, but it's mine. She picked up the folder Sarah had left and carried it to the kitchen, dropped it in the sink, pulled out matches from a drawer, and set the entire thing on fire. Jin watched the evidence burn. That doesn't change anything. They have copies. I know. But they don't have my cooperation. Ava turned to face him. I'm not testifying. I'm not disappearing into witness protection. I'm staying. Ava, I'm staying, she repeated, firmer. Whatever happens next, we face it together. That's non-negotiable. You'll go to prison. Then we'll go to prison. But at least I won't spend the rest of my life knowing I destroyed you to save myself. Jin stared at her like he was seeing something impossible. Then he pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. You're insane. You understand that, right? Completely, irrationally insane. I learned from the best. He kissed her, desperate, grateful, terrified. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. We have 48 hours before the FBI moves. That's not enough time to run, not enough time to hide properly, not enough time to do anything except prepare for the worst. Then what do? We make them work for it. Destroy records, move assets offshore, make sure that even if they arrest us, the organization survives. His hands moved through her hair. And we make sure that whatever happens, you have an exit strategy that doesn't involve decades in federal prison. I told you. I heard you. But I'm not giving up on keeping you safe just because you've decided to be reckless. He pulled back, already shifting into strategic mode. Min-jun. The door opened immediately. Min-jun must have been listening through it the entire time. Start Protocol 7, Jin said in English for Ava's benefit. 48-hour timeline. Prioritize financial transfers and document destruction. Contact our legal team. And find me everything the FBI has on their investigation. If they're moving in 2 days, they'll be coordinating with local law enforcement. Someone will talk. Someone always talks. Min-jun nodded and disappeared. The next 48 hours were chaos measured in phone calls and encrypted messages, and people moving through the loft at all hours. Lawyers arrived with briefcases full of contingency plans. Financial advisors transferred money through offshore accounts so complex Ava couldn't follow the logic. Security teams coordinated surveillance and counter-surveillance, while Jin orchestrated everything with the calm efficiency of a general preparing for war. Ava helped where she could. Mostly, she just stayed out of the way and watched Jin dismantle the life he'd spent 15 years building, piece by piece, dollar by dollar, connection by connection. On the second night, long after everyone else had left and the loft was finally quiet, Jin found her standing at the windows staring at the city. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much adrenaline. She didn't turn around. Is it done? Everything you needed to do? Mostly. The organization will survive even if I don't. Leadership succession plans are in place. Financial infrastructure is protected. The people who depend on me will be taken care of. He moved beside her, shoulder touching hers. I've prepared for this scenario since I came to Chicago. Just never thought I'd actually have to implement it. What happens when they come? They'll arrest me. Probably you too, despite your lack of cooperation. We'll be processed separately. Different facilities, no communication. They'll try to use isolation to break us. Get one of us to flip on the other. His voice stayed calm, but underneath it, Ava heard exhaustion. Standard interrogation tactics. Nothing we can't withstand if we're prepared. How long? Months? Maybe years. Depends on how long the trial takes and whether they can actually build a case strong enough to convict without testimony. He turned toward her. I've arranged for a lawyer specifically for you, top federal defense attorney. She'll make sure you're protected even if I can't be.
I don't want a different lawyer. I want the same one as you. That's not strategic. Separate counsel means it. I don't care about strategic. Ava finally looked at him. Stop trying to protect me by pushing me away. Stop making decisions designed to save me from consequences you think I can't handle. I'm still here. I'm still choosing you. And I need you to respect that choice, even if you think it's wrong. Jin studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, same lawyer, same strategy. Together. Thank you. They stood in silence, watching Chicago glitter beneath them. Somewhere out there, federal agents were preparing raids, coordinating arrests, building cages designed to contain people exactly like Jin, and Ava was about to walk into those cages with him. I need to tell you something, Jin said quietly. Before they come, before everything changes. What? The night I sat down at your table at Miral, that wasn't random. I knew who you were before I approached you. Ava's stomach dropped. What are you talking about? 3 weeks before that night, one of Victor's men approached you outside your office building. Do you remember? Someone asking for directions? She did remember. A man with an accent asking how to get to the nearest train station. She'd given him directions and forgotten about it immediately. That was surveillance, Jin continued. Victor was looking for leverage, testing people around me to see who might be vulnerable. When his man reported back that you'd been kind and helpful and completely oblivious to danger, Victor flagged you as a potential target. So you knew he was watching me. I knew he was considering you, and I made a decision. Jin's jaw tightened. I approached you first. Made sure you were connected to me before Victor could use you against me. The dinner at Miral, the performance, the men watching from the bar, all of it was designed to establish you as mine before Victor could establish you as collateral. Ava backed away from him. You're saying everything between us started as a strategy? No. I'm saying my initial approach was strategic, but everything after that, every conversation, every dinner, every moment, that was real. I didn't plan to fall in love with you. I planned to keep you safe by making Victor think you were already protected. And then you sat across from me and agreed to help a dangerous stranger, and I couldn't. He stopped, started again. I couldn't maintain the distance I'd planned to maintain. You became real too fast, and by the time I realized how much you mattered, it was too late to walk away cleanly. You should have told me. When? During which conversation would that have gone well? By the way, I approached you because a Russian crime lord was planning to use you as leverage, but don't worry, I've definitely fallen in love with you for real now. His voice carried an edge of desperation. I kept waiting for the right moment, and then Victor made his move and everything accelerated and the right moment never came. So you're telling me now, hours before the FBI arrests us both. That's your timing? I'm telling you now because I don't want you walking into prison cells still believing in a version of our beginning that wasn't completely true. Jin moved toward her but stopped when she backed away again. You deserve to know everything before you sacrifice your freedom for me. You deserve the chance to change your mind. Ava's mind was spinning. Every memory from that first night was recontextualizing itself. The way Jin had noticed her before sitting down, the precise timing of his approach, the performance that had felt spontaneous but had actually been calculated from the beginning. Did you mean any of it? She asked. When you said you loved me, when you said I mattered, was any of that real or was I always just a strategic asset you convinced yourself to care about? It was all real. His voice cracked. Everything I've told you about how I feel, that's the most honest I've been with anyone in my entire life. The approach was strategic, but the love was real. Is real. That's why I'm telling you this now, because you need to know the difference before you decide whether to stay. I've already decided. Decide again, with complete information. Ava pressed her palms against her eyes. Her entire body felt like it was vibrating with exhaustion and betrayal, and a horrible understanding that maybe Sarah Chen had been right. Maybe loving Jin meant signing up for a lifetime of discovering new ways he'd manipulated situations to achieve outcomes he'd decided were necessary. But manipulation didn't erase the truth of everything that had happened between them. The conversations, the careful attention, the way he'd slowly opened himself to her in ways he'd never opened to anyone else. Those things were real even if the foundation had been built on strategy. I'm still staying, she said finally. Ava, I'm angry. I'm hurt. I feel like every time I think I understand you completely, Another layer gets pulled back, and I discover something new you were hiding. She lowered her hands. But I'm still staying, because even knowing everything, the manipulation, the strategy, the calculated approach, I still love you. And maybe that makes me as damaged as you are. But it's the truth. Jin closed the distance between them and pulled her against his chest. She felt him shaking. I don't deserve you. No, you don't. But that's not really the point anymore. They stood like that while minutes ticked past. Outside, the night was ending. Dawn was coming. And with it, the consequences they'd been trying to outrun since the moment Jin had sat down at her table and changed both their lives forever. At 6 in the morning, Min-jun knocked on the door. They're moving, federal agents coordinating with CPD, multiple locations. They'll be here within the hour. Jin released Ava. Get dressed, professional clothes. Nothing that makes you look guilty or defiant, just normal corporate wear. What about you? Same. He was already moving toward the bedroom, pulling out clothes, his movements efficient despite the exhaustion she knew he felt. We're not giving them the satisfaction of looking defeated. Ava changed into a gray suit that felt like armor. Professional. Unremarkable. The kind of outfit she used to wear to client presentations back when her biggest concern was color palettes and brand messaging. That life felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. Jin emerged wearing a dark suit that made him look like he was heading to a business meeting instead of an arrest. He'd shaved, fixed his hair, put on the controlled mask he wore whenever he needed to project absolute composure. Ready? He asked. No. Me neither. He took her hand. But let's do this anyway. They waited in the living room. Min-jun and 2 other security personnel positioned themselves strategically, not for defense because fighting federal agents was suicide, but for documentation. Cameras recording everything, lawyers on standby, witnesses ready to ensure the arrest happened by the book. At 6:43, someone pounded on the door. FBI, we have a warrant. Jin squeezed Ava's hand once, then released it. Min-jun opened the door. Agents flooded inside, at least a dozen, weapons drawn, voices overlapping in a choreographed chaos of commands and legal declarations. They separated Ava and Jin immediately, forcing them to opposite sides of the room while someone read their rights and someone else searched the space for evidence that had already been destroyed days ago. Sarah Chen entered last. She looked at Ava with something that might have been regret or might have been satisfaction. Hard to tell. Ava Marlowe, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering and obstruction of justice. The handcuffs were cold against Ava's wrists. You have the right to remain silent. Ava stopped listening. She looked across the room at Jin. He was already in handcuffs too, 2 agents on either side of him, but his eyes were locked on hers. In them she saw everything they'd never have time to say. Apologies and promises and desperate hope that somehow they'd survive what was coming. She tried to memorize his face, the sharp angles, the tattoos disappearing under his collar, the exhaustion he wore like a second skin, the man who'd sat down at her table and offered her a choice that had led here, to this moment, this arrest, this consequence. I love you, she mouthed silently. Jin's expression cracked just slightly. I love you too. Then agents pulled them toward separate doors, separate cars, separate facilities where they'd be processed and interrogated and broken down through isolation and strategic pressure. As they forced Ava into the hallway, she looked back one final time. Jin was already being escorted toward the elevator, his head up, his posture defiant even in handcuffs. A dangerous man facing the consequences of a dangerous life. And Ava was facing those consequences with him. The elevator doors closed. The last thing she saw was his eyes, dark, fierce, burning with something between rage and devotion, before metal and distance separated them completely. The war was over. The cages were waiting, and whatever came next would either destroy them both or forge them into something impossible to break. Ava didn't know which, but as federal agents pushed her into the back of an unmarked car and Chicago disappeared behind tinted windows, she understood one fundamental truth. Some loves were worth burning for, and she'd chosen her fire. Federal holding felt like drowning in fluorescent light. Ava sat in a concrete room painted industrial beige, handcuffed to a metal table bolted to the floor. The chair was deliberately uncomfortable. The air was too cold. Everything designed to break down resistance through systematic discomfort.
She'd been here for 6 hours, maybe 7. Time moved strangely without windows or clocks, or any reference point beyond the unchanging brightness overhead.
3 different agents had interrogated her, each one with a different approach. The first had been aggressive, shouting, slamming folders, trying to intimidate her into immediate confession. The second had been sympathetic, offering coffee, speaking softly, suggesting cooperation would make everything easier. The third had been clinical, just reading facts from files, asking for confirmation, building a case brick by methodical brick. Ava had said nothing to all of them beyond requesting her lawyer. The door opened again. Sarah Chen entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of Ava and sat down across from her, looking tired in the way people look when they've been working the same case too long without breaks. "Your lawyer is stuck in traffic," Sarah said. "Accident on the Kennedy. She'll be here in about an hour." Ava didn't respond. "I'm not here to interrogate you. I'm just here to talk. Off the record." Sarah sipped her coffee. "You're going to go to prison, Ava. That's not a threat. That's just reality. We have enough evidence to convict you on conspiracy charges even without your cooperation. The only question is how long you're inside and what your life looks like when you get out." "I asked for my lawyer." "I know. And she'll be here soon. But before she arrives and tells you to stay silent, I want you to understand something." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Jin Hae-jin doesn't love you. Not really. He loves what you represent, normalcy, innocence, a life he can never have. But the moment protecting you becomes inconvenient, he'll sacrifice you without hesitation. That's who he is. That's what men like him do." "You don't know him. I know exactly what he is. I've been investigating him for 18 months. I've interviewed his associates, studied his patterns, watched him operate, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that everything you think you know about him is performance designed to keep you compliant." Sarah's voice stayed level. "He used you from the beginning. The dinner at Miral, the courtship, the danger, all of it calculated to make you feel special, chosen, important enough to sacrifice everything for. But you're not special to him. You're convenient." Ava's hands tightened around the coffee cup. "Are we done?" "Almost. One more thing." Sarah pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. "This was taken 3 days ago, after you told Jin you weren't cooperating with us." The image showed Jin meeting with a woman Ava didn't recognize. They sat close together in what looked like an upscale restaurant. The woman was beautiful, mid-30s, dark hair, elegant in a way that suggested money and breeding. Jin's hand rested on hers across the table. "Her name is Michelle Park," Sarah said. "Lawyer, Korean-American, represents several high-profile criminal defense cases." She paused. "Also Jin's ex-girlfriend from 5 years ago. He called her the day after you refused to cooperate with the FBI. They've had 3 meetings since then. Long meetings, private meetings." Ava stared at the photograph, tried to find some explanation that made sense. Some strategic reason Jin would be meeting with an ex-girlfriend while Ava was destroying federal evidence and choosing prison over betrayal. "He's already moving on," Sarah continued quietly, "because that's what survivors do. They adapt, find new anchors, start building the next version of their life that doesn't include the people who become liabilities. You sacrificed everything for him, and he's having dinner with someone who won't." The door opened. A woman in an expensive suit walked in carrying a briefcase. "This interview is over. I'm Catherine Wright, Miss Marlowe's attorney. Any further questions need to go through me." Sarah stood. "Of course. I was just leaving." She looked at Ava one final time. "Think about what I said. You still have time to make a different choice." She left. Catherine sat down in her place and immediately began talking about legal strategy, about what to expect, about the case the federal government was building. Ava heard maybe half of it. The rest of her attention stayed locked on that photograph of Jin with another woman, their hands touching, both of them looking comfortable in a way that felt like betrayal even if it wasn't. 3 days later, they moved Ava from federal holding to Cook County while they processed paperwork and prepared for arraignment. The new facility was worse, overcrowded, loud, violent in ways the federal system tried to avoid. Ava shared a cell with 2 other women who asked no questions and offered no comfort. Just coexistence measured in hours until something changed. She saw Jin once during a court appearance. He was on the other side of the room in orange jail scrubs that made him look diminished somehow. Smaller. More human. Their eyes met across the courtroom for maybe 3 seconds before guards separated them again. In those 3 seconds, Ava saw exhaustion, regret, something that looked like desperation beneath the controlled mask he maintained even here. But she also remembered the photograph, his hand on Michelle Park's hand, the easy comfort between them. A week became 2 weeks, became a month. Catherine Wright was brilliant, aggressive, strategic, willing to fight every charge with the kind of ferocity that made prosecutors work for every inch of progress. But even brilliance couldn't erase evidence. Financial records placing Ava at meetings where criminal activity was discussed, surveillance footage showing her entering properties connected to money laundering, testimony from low-level associates who'd already flipped, describing her presence during conversations she should never have witnessed. The case was strong enough to convict. The only question was the sentence. "They're offering a plea deal," Catherine said during a meeting in a concrete room that smelled like disinfectant and defeat. 3 years. Medium security facility. You'd be eligible for parole in 18 months with good behavior. What about Jin? Separate case. Separate deal. He's being offered 7 years, but his lawyers think they can negotiate down to 5. Catherine's expression was unreadable. You need to make this decision independently. Don't factor him into your calculation. I can't not factor him in. Yes, you can. Because the prosecution is very clear about one thing. If you take this deal, you don't get to communicate with Jin during your sentence. No calls, no letters, no contact until both of you have completed your time. Catherine leaned back. They want to make sure you're truly separated, that he can't influence you further. Ava's chest felt tight. So I take the deal and lose him. Or I go to trial and probably lose anyway with a longer sentence. That's the situation. Can I think about it? You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires and we go to trial. Back in her cell, Ava lay on the thin mattress staring at concrete ceiling while her mind spun through impossible calculations. 3 years without seeing Jin. 3 years of not knowing if he was okay, if he was surviving. If the man who'd sat down at her table still existed somewhere beneath the violence and strategy and brutal pragmatism that defined his world. Or she could fight, go to trial, roll the dice on a jury that might see her as a victim manipulated by a criminal or might see her as an accomplice who'd chosen her fate. The next morning, a guard delivered a message. You have a visitor. Ava expected Catherine. Instead, she found Michelle Park sitting in the visitor's room looking elegant, even surrounded by institutional gray. She stood when Ava entered. Thank you for seeing me, Michelle said. I know this is strange. What do you want? To tell you the truth about the photograph the FBI showed you. Michelle gestured to the chairs. Can we sit? Ava sat, waited. Jin called me 3 days after your arrest, Michelle began. He asked me to represent you. I said no initially. Too much conflict of interest, too complicated. But he was insistent, desperate actually, so I agreed to meet with him to discuss it. She paused. That's what the photograph shows. A professional meeting about your legal representation, not a romantic reunion. The FBI said you were his ex-girlfriend. I was. 5 years ago. For about 8 months before we both realized we worked better as friends than lovers. Michelle's voice was matter of fact. We've maintained a professional relationship since then. I've handled several cases for his organization, but there's nothing romantic between us. Hasn't been for years. Why should I believe you? Because I'm here telling you this when I have no obligation to. Because Jin asked me to make sure you understood before you made any decisions about your plea deal. Because the FBI is using that photograph to manipulate you into believing he's already moved on when the truth is he's spent every waking moment trying to protect you. Michelle pulled out a folder. He wanted me to give you this. Letters he's been writing but couldn't send because of the no contact order. Read them, then make your decision. She slid the folder across the table and left. Ava stared at the folder for a long moment before opening it. Inside were maybe 20 handwritten pages. Jin's careful script filling every line with words he'd never been able to say out loud. She read them all. They weren't love letters exactly. They were confessions, apologies, detailed explanations of every calculated move he'd made, every strategic decision, Every moment he'd manipulated circumstances because he didn't know how else to operate. But between the apologies were truths that felt like wounds. I don't know how to love someone without trying to control the situation. I've spent my entire life surviving through strategy, and I don't know how to turn that off even when I want to. You deserved honesty from the beginning. Instead, I gave you performance because performance was all I knew how to give. By the time I realized what I was doing, I was already in too deep to fix it cleanly. If I could go back to that night at Miral, I would tell you the truth immediately. I would explain that I was approaching you strategically, but hoping desperately that it could become something real. I would give you the choice I never actually gave you, walk away or step into my world knowing exactly what that meant. I would do a lot of things differently, but I can't. So all I have is this. I love you. Not strategically, not because you're convenient or useful. I love you because you looked at me across that table and saw something worth saving when I'd stopped believing anything about me was salvageable. Take the plea deal. Don't go to trial. 3 years is survivable, 5 is survivable, but do it separately. Don't wait for me. Don't sacrifice more time hoping I'll be the person you deserve when you get out. You walked into my life by accident. You stayed by choice. But now I'm asking you to leave by choice too. Because that's the only way I know to love you correctly, by letting you go before I destroy what's left of you. The last page was just one sentence. I'm sorry I sat down at your table, and I'm grateful every day that I did. Ava read the letters 3 times. Then she made her decision. She took the plea deal. 3 years. Medium security. 18 months with good behavior. The prosecutor looked satisfied. Catherine looked relieved. Jin wasn't present at the hearing where Ava signed the paperwork that ended one life and began another. A week later, they transferred her to a federal facility downstate. Clean, structured, survivable. She was assigned to a cell with one roommate, a woman serving time for embezzlement who read constantly and didn't ask questions about why a 31-year-old marketing manager ended up in federal prison. Ava worked in the library, took classes, learned that survival in institutional spaces meant routine, small goals, and not thinking too far ahead. Days became weeks, became months. She didn't hear anything about Jin, didn't know if he'd taken his own plea deal or gone to trial, didn't know if he was alive or destroyed by the system designed to break men exactly like him. But she didn't forget him either, couldn't, because every morning when she woke up in a concrete room under fluorescent lights, Ava remembered what it felt like to feel alive, to be seen completely, to love someone dangerous enough that the consequences included federal prison and still choose him anyway. 15 months into her sentence, Catherine visited with news. Jin took a plea deal, 5 years. He's in a federal facility in Indiana, minimum security. He's doing okay, working, keeping his head down, surviving. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked me to let you know if I heard anything. Catherine's expression softened slightly. And because he asked me to make sure you knew he's okay, that he's waiting, that 3 years isn't forever even though it feels like it. I told him not to wait. He's not particularly good at following instructions. You might have noticed that about him. Despite everything, Ava almost smiled. 3 months later, 18 months total, Ava walked out of federal prison on parole. Catherine was waiting outside with a car and a folder full of paperwork. New identity documents, bank account with enough money to start over. Apartment lease in a city far from Chicago where nobody knew her story. What about Jin? Ava asked as they drove toward the city. 3.5 years left on his sentence. Could get out earlier with good behavior, but it's not guaranteed. Catherine kept her eyes on the road. He asked me to tell you that the loft is still yours if you want it. Everything inside is exactly as you left it. Or you can take the apartment I arranged and start completely fresh. I can't go back to the loft. I didn't think so. But he wanted you to know the option existed. The apartment Catherine had arranged was in Minneapolis. Small, clean, anonymous. Ava spent the first week just learning how to be alone again without guards or schedules or institutional routine. The silence was overwhelming. The choices were overwhelming. Freedom felt like drowning after 18 months of structure. But slowly, Ava rebuilt. She found work doing freelance marketing consultation from home, started running in the mornings, learned to cook more than just basic survival meals, made a few careful friendships with neighbors who knew nothing about her past and didn't ask. 6 months after her release, Catherine called. Jin wants to add you to his approved visitor list. He's not asking you to visit, he's just asking for the option if you ever want to. Ava thought about it for 3 days before responding. Tell him yes. Another month passed before she actually made the drive to Indiana. The federal facility was cleaner than the one she'd been in, more campus than prison, minimum security for nonviolent offenders who'd cooperated with investigations. Ava signed in, went through security, and waited in a visiting room that tried hard to not look institutional but failed anyway. Then Jin walked in. He looked different, thinner, hair longer, moving with less controlled precision and more careful wariness. But his eyes were the same, dark, sharp, immediately finding hers across the room. He sat down across from her at a small table, didn't touch her because physical contact was limited, just looked at her like he was memorizing every detail in case this was the only time he got. You came, he said. I almost didn't. I would have understood if you didn't. His voice was rougher than she remembered. I'm surprised Catherine convinced you. She didn't convince me. I decided on my own. Why? Ava thought about the question. About 18 months in federal prison and 6 months rebuilding a life in a city where she knew no one. About nights spent wondering if the man she'd sacrificed everything for still existed, or if the system had finally broken what violence and strategy couldn't. Because I needed to see if you were still you, she said finally. If the person I loved survived what we went through. Did he? I don't know yet. That's why I'm here. They talked for an hour, carefully at first, then easier. Jin told her about daily routine, about working in the facility's administrative office, about teaching English to other inmates who barely spoke the language. Ava told him about Minneapolis, about freelance work, about learning to run in the mornings because it was the only time she felt like she could breathe properly. Neither of them mentioned the federal case or the betrayals or the photographs that had been designed to break them. Those things existed between them, but felt less important now. Survival had erased everything except the fundamental question. Could two people who'd loved each other through catastrophe still find something worth building on the other side? I read your letters, Ava said near the end of the visit, the ones Michelle gave me. I meant every word. I know. That's what made them hard to read. I'm sorry. Don't apologize again. I've had 18 months to decide whether to forgive you. I'm still deciding. But I'm here. That has to count for something. Jin's hand moved toward hers, then stopped, remembering the rules about physical contact. It counts for everything. The guard announced 5 minutes remaining. Ava stood. Jin stood. They looked at each other across the small table. Will you come back? He asked. I don't know. That's fair. But I'm not saying no. Ava picked up her jacket. 3.5 years is a long time. A lot can change. People can change. Maybe we both need to finish becoming whoever we're supposed to be before we try to be anything to each other again. And if we can't be anything to each other again, then at least we survived. That's more than a lot of people can say. She left before she could change her mind, before she could reach across the table and touch him the way she wanted to, before the careful distance she'd built collapsed under the weight of seeing him alive and breathing, and still somehow himself despite everything. The drive back to Minneapolis took 6 hours. Ava spent them crying, then not crying, then just staring at the highway while her mind replayed every moment from that first night at Miral until now. The trajectory of her life reduced to a series of choices that had led her away from safety toward something more dangerous and more real simultaneously. She visited Jin 3 more times over the next year, each visit lasting an hour. Each conversation digging deeper into who they'd become separately and whether those separate people could ever fit together again. On the 4th visit, Jin told her about the architecture project. I've been working with a developer, he said, someone I knew before everything fell apart. He's doing a rehabilitation project in Chicago, converting old industrial properties into mixed-use developments, residential, commercial, community spaces. He needs an architect, a good one, someone who understands structure and vision. I'm not an architect. You were studying to be one before you gave up on it. Catherine said you still have most of your credits. You could finish the degree. Take the licensing exam. Actually do the work you were meant to do instead of marketing campaigns for tech companies that don't matter. Ava stared at him. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a possibility.
something to build toward that isn't defined by what we lost.
The position won't be available for another 2 years. That's when I get out and can actually facilitate the introduction properly. But if you want it, it's yours. No obligations, no strings. Just an opportunity to do work that matters.
Why? Because I destroyed your life. The least I can do is help you build a new one that's better than what you had before. His voice was steady. And because I need to believe that something good came from the disaster we created together. Ava left that visit with a decision half formed in her mind.
She enrolled in an architecture program in Minneapolis, finished her degree in 18 months while working freelance to pay the bills, took the licensing exam, and passed on the first attempt. Started taking on small projects, residential renovations, small commercial spaces, while she built a portfolio that proved she could translate vision into reality. 2 years after her visit with Jin, Catherine called. He's being released next week. Early release for good behavior. He wants to know if you're still interested in the Chicago project. Yes. Then I'll make the introduction. Ava drove to Chicago on a gray April morning. The city looked the same, glass and steel and chaos rising from the lake. But she felt different, steadier, more certain about who she was and what she wanted to build. The meeting was in a renovated warehouse in West Loop. The developer was a man in his 50s who spoke quickly and with passion about transforming forgotten industrial spaces into neighborhoods where people could live and work and thrive. The project was massive, 10 properties across 3 years. The budget was substantial. The timeline was aggressive. Jin spoke highly of your work, the developer said, showing her preliminary renderings. He said you understood how to make old things new again without erasing what made them valuable in the first place. He said that? Among other things, he's invested in this project. Silent partner, wants to make sure it's done right. Ava looked at the renderings, saw potential, saw challenge, saw a chance to build something that would outlast the mistakes that had brought her here. I'm interested, she said. Good. Start date is 3 months from now. That work for you? Yes. They shook hands. Ava walked out into the Chicago afternoon feeling like something had aligned finally. Not perfectly, not without scars, but aligned enough that forward movement was possible. She found Jin waiting outside. He stood beside a car looking older than when she'd first met him. Not aged exactly, but weathered. Lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Hair shorter. No tattoos visible beneath the long sleeves of his shirt. He'd adapted to life outside prison the way he'd adapted to everything else. Strategically, carefully, with calculated precision. But when he saw her, something in his expression cracked. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Ava to see the man beneath the strategy. You came, he said. You knew I would. Hoped. Didn't know. He shoved his hands in his pockets. The project is real. The developer is legitimate. I had nothing to do with the hiring decision beyond recommending you. This isn't manipulation. It's just an opportunity. I know. Do you? He moved closer. Because I need you to understand that I'm not trying to pull you back into my life. I'm trying to give you the life you should have had before I sat down at your table and destroyed everything. You didn't destroy everything. I destroyed enough. Ava looked at him, really looked, and saw exhaustion and regret and careful hope all tangled together. Saw a man who'd spent 5 years in prison learning how to live with consequences instead of avoiding them. Saw someone who'd been broken down and rebuilt into something different. Have dinner with me, she said. Jin blinked. What? Dinner. Tonight. No strategy, no performance. Just two people who used to know each other trying to figure out if they still can. Ava, I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm not offering forgiveness or reconciliation. I'm just asking for dinner, one meal, conversation, possibility. She held his gaze. Can you do that? He nodded slowly. Yeah, I can do that. They went to a small Korean restaurant in Lincoln Square. Nothing fancy, just good food and quiet corners where conversations could unfold without performance. They ordered too much food like people do when they're nervous. Talked carefully at first about Minneapolis and federal prison and the architecture project. Then Ava asked the question she'd been carrying for 3 years. Are you still the same person? No? Jin set down his chopsticks. Prison breaks you down to fundamentals. Either you come out worse or you come out different. I came out different. Less controlled, more willing to accept that I can't orchestrate every outcome. more willing to fail at things instead of avoiding them completely. That's vague. I'm in therapy, actual therapy, twice a week, trying to unlearn patterns I've been building since I was 15, trying to figure out how to be someone who can have relationships without destroying them through strategy and manipulation. He looked directly at her. I don't know if it's working, but I'm trying. That's more than I've ever done before. Why now? Because losing you was the only thing that ever hurt more than surviving did. And I realized I'd spent my entire life choosing survival over everything else, over honesty, over vulnerability, over love. His voice roughened. So I'm choosing different now, even if it's too late, even if you've moved on, even if all I get is this one dinner before you disappear into your new life. Ava's chest felt tight. I haven't moved on. You should. I know, but I haven't. She leaned back. You scared me. The manipulation, the calculated approaches, the way you treated love like a chess game. All of it scared me because I never knew what was real and what was performance. And I can't live like that. I won't. I understand. But I also can't forget what it felt like to be seen by you, to matter to someone enough that they'd burn their entire world down before letting anyone hurt me. That was real. Even when everything else was strategy, that was real. And I don't know what to do with that truth. They sat in silence while the restaurant moved around them. Other diners laughing, servers delivering food, life continuing normally while two people tried to figure out if the wreckage they'd made could be rebuilt into something livable. I don't expect anything from you, Jin said finally. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but if you let me be part of your life, even peripherally, even at a distance, I promise I'll never lie to you again, never manipulate situations, never treat you like a strategic asset instead of a person I love. That's a big promise. I know, but it's the only one I can make that matters. Ava thought about the letters he'd written from prison, about the architecture project he'd arranged without asking for anything in return, about 5 years he'd spent learning how to be different instead of just better at hiding what he was. I need time, she said. I need to work on this project and rebuild my career and figure out who I am separate from who I was when we first met. But I don't want you to disappear completely. I want to know you're in the world. I want to see if the version of you that came out of prison can coexist with the version of me that came out of mine. How long? However long it takes. Months. Maybe years. No timeline, no pressure, just possibility held at a distance until we're both ready to examine it up close. Jin nodded slowly. I can do that. Can you really? Can you exist without controlling the outcome? Without strategizing 3 steps ahead? Without turning this into another calculated move designed to achieve a specific result? I don't know, but I want to find out. He reached across the table, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed hers. Just that, nothing more. Thank you for giving me the chance to try. They finished dinner, walked outside into the Chicago night. Spring was pushing winter aside. Warmer air, stars visible between buildings, the city humming with possibility. Jin walked Ava to her car, stood beside it while she unlocked the door. Will I see you again? He asked. Yes, but I don't know when. That's fair. She got in the car, started the engine, looked at him through the open window. Jin? Yeah? I'm glad you sat down at my table. Something shifted in his expression. Relief. Gratitude. Careful hope. Me too. Ava drove back to Minneapolis, thinking about beginnings and endings and the space between them where people decided who they wanted to become. 3 months later, she moved back to Chicago to start the architecture project. Found an apartment with river views, threw herself into work with the kind of focus that came from finally doing what she was meant to do. Jin was careful about distance. He didn't show up uninvited, didn't orchestrate accidental meetings, just existed somewhere in the city while Ava built buildings from abandoned industrial spaces and learned what it meant to transform something broken into something beautiful. They had coffee once a month, casual meetings in public places where they talked about work and recovery and the slow process of becoming people who could trust themselves again. 6 months became a year, became 18 months. The first building in the development project opened on a Saturday in October. glass and steel and exposed brick rising from what had once been a forgotten warehouse. Residential units on the upper floors, commercial spaces at street level, community areas designed for gatherings and connection. It was the first thing Ava had ever built that felt entirely hers. The opening ceremony was small: city officials, investors, press coverage. Ava stood beside the developer while photographers documented the moment. And in the back of the crowd, she saw Jin. He didn't approach, just stood watching. When their eyes met, he nodded once. Acknowledgement, pride, recognition of what she'd accomplished. After the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Ava found him still there. "It's beautiful," he said. "Better than the renderings suggested. Thank you."
No, thank you for taking the opportunity, for building something that will outlast all the mistakes we made. They stood looking at the building together. Sunlight caught the windows, made them glow. "I've been thinking about what you said," Ava told him, "about second chances, about whether two people can rebuild trust after it's been shattered completely. What have you decided?" "That I don't know, but I'm willing to find out if you are." Jin turned toward her. "What does that mean?"
"It means have dinner with me. Regularly. Not once a month, but weekly. Let's actually try to build something instead of just holding possibility at a distance." She held his gaze. "I'm not promising it works. I'm not promising I can forget everything that happened. But I'm promising to try. To actually try instead of just surviving separately. You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Jin's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but suggested hope he'd been holding back for months. "When do we start?" "Now, tonight. I know a place." They walked through Chicago streets while evening settled over the city, found a restaurant neither of them had been to before, new territory, unmarked by old memories. Sat across from each other at a table that held only the possibility of what they might become instead of the weight of what they'd been. And for the first time since a dangerous man had sat down uninvited at Miral and asked her to pretend to be his wife, Ava felt like maybe they weren't pretending anymore. Maybe they were building something real from the ruins of everything they'd destroyed. It wouldn't be easy. Trust didn't rebuild overnight. Love didn't survive catastrophe without scars. But some things were worth the difficulty, worth the risk, worth choosing again and again, even when logic suggested walking away. Outside the restaurant windows, Chicago glittered like it had that first night, all light and shadow and infinite possibility hidden in plain sight. Some lives began when others fell apart. Some loves arrived disguised as accidents. And sometimes the empty seat across the table was always waiting for exactly the right person to finally sit down and stay. Not perfectly, not without cost, but permanently. And that was enough.